Everything begins with this popular autumn game called Noblesse Fantasia. And the thing is, it's only called an autumn game. A pure magical action fantasy awaits us all over the world, where the main goal is to take down the strongest thief Tilt, the big boss everyone has to face. He says that in the end he dedicated his whole life to it, became a holy swordsman to follow his destiny, and now everything changed just as it started here, in a quiet little village near the mountain. After a fierce clash, Sold falls to the ground and his father hoarsely says, "The match is almost over." But the boy does not give up. Even when his father calls him by name and asks him to stop, he gets up again and replies that it's not over yet. He flies back into the fight, shouting for his father to prepare, while the older man tries to stop him and make him slow down. A villager passing by glanced at the two and snorted, as if to say the master ranger is always so wound up. And the old woman nearby also notices and wonders why this hardworking little Lord Sol trains every day, every second. Dad really starts sweating first and finally horses. Seld, maybe we just take a short break. But Sewell does not look away, focused to the last drop. He tells his father that training needs to be much tougher and that he generally cannot use magic, so he must compensate for it with a sword. Everything happens in a small, quiet village somewhere in the middle of nowhere, where even silence sounds heavy. And only later does it become clear. This place is hidden inside the kingdom of Alberta. This is the world of the game Noblesse Fantasia. If you liked this video, hit like and subscribe to the channel to see more videos like this. See you in the next video. It turns out the boy was born into the ranger family, minor nobles who live somewhere far away in a village, in a real backwater. The soldier suddenly comes to the conclusion he was actually reincarnated in this world as a sword. Still a baby, his new parents gave him the name Soul Ranger. He clearly remembered how he first woke up and saw these two strangers looking back at him. When he was raised, he began to piece everything together, carefully listening to how people named things and what they did to whom. Eventually, he realized that he was stuck somewhere in a random corner of the game world. More precisely, as the son of a baron who has absolutely no influence on the course of history itself, he decided there must be a real reason why he was thrown into such a game world. And even despite all the great hopes for a new life, Dad simply calls him back to bring everything to reality. Saul's father calls him over and says they need to have a serious talk, and it turns out that this is the worst news for a gamer. Dad explains that the Ranger family hasn't been able to use magic for generations, so Sold's dreams are shattered. The game world relies on magic and on saving the world from the beast, so realizing that he can't use any of this, he feels like he's hit a wall and it hits him hard. He just freezes, staring into emptiness because the world is such. Someone who can't use magic fields is a useless character without a true purpose. But even despite this, he doesn't seem special. Yet he still believes in fate and runs out of the house, shouting to his dad to look at what he found in the attic. Sold firmly holds an old scroll and shows a drawn warrior, as if he finally grabbed his big chance. He is sure this is a secret technique sword bypass in the style of demon god, but his father just stands there looking utterly exhausted. The scroll describes insane power. A person can hold demonic energy inside, turning their own soul into a weapon. It assures that from this particular stance, the user can release a deadly strike to kill known as Kama Isen. Saul is wildly excited because he thinks he has stumbled upon a hidden secret game mechanic in the real world. And he insists that this technique is the answer for those like him, who are completely incapable of using any magic. Raising his sword, he shouts that this is his destiny, that he will master the style of the demon god. His father immediately cuts off the conversation and says that Saul misunderstood everything. All of this really shakes the ground beneath his feet. The father admits the scroll is a family relic passed down from generation to generation. And then he reveals the truth: all the secret techniques are complete fakes. It turns out that every man in their family over the last 3 generations tried to master that scroll during training. But none of them managed to make this move work for real. The father says that perhaps the ancestors just made all this up to give children without magic at least some false hope. He froze in place and suddenly clearly realized the legendary scroll is essentially just a fairy tale drawn on paper. Sold looks at the scroll and it seems to engulf him completely. The boy tries to understand whether this scroll could be a fake. And his father just says that it's normal. Not being able to use magic or that particular style is not a problem. Then he explains that their family has protected this peaceful land for generations, and that life, if you think about it, is quite good. Leaving them standing silently together, they were simply gazing into the vast world. Until he is twisted out of this, and he, Reinitz, will not shout that the father must lie, the scroll is not a pipe. He does not believe for a moment, instead he shouts that he will prove it is real no matter what happens. Since then he trains every day under his father's guidance. 3 full years have passed. Sold has grown, become much more cunning, but still could not put into practice the techniques in the style of the demon god. The father looks at him and says that the move is just a drawing in a book, then asks if he is finally ready to quit. But Sol keeps turning his swing, stubbornly does not give up on the dream. Sol looks his father straight in the eyes and shouts that he will never give up, stubbornly making it clear. His path is right here. And Dad only sighs and mumbles that everything is fine, and that he can continue until finally he is satisfied. But now the father says they need to go home, otherwise Mom will get angry, so Sol quickly agrees and promises to call. Casting a glance at the parents and the maid who stayed in the house, Sol suddenly clearly understands. He has found a very good family. And to be honest, life is really just wonderful. Big family dinners and horseback rides through the fields during the day. He spends time with his dad fishing, while Mom sits at the picnic and watches them, and he honestly admits he has no complaints about this life. But as soon as the sun sets over the estate and stars flare up in the sky, everything suddenly starts to feel different. Sol does not sleep in his room. He lies staring at the ceiling, thinking that he really wants to believe in something more. So he must have a real reason why he reincarnated as a worthless nobleman in this world. The sky outside is covered with grayness, and heavy rain begins to pour over the quiet house. Sol asks his mom where his dad is, and she replies that he left early for a meeting with other nobles. She is a little confused by this whole story. She does not understand why even rural nobles like them would be called. And Sol just looks out the window as the rain drums on the glass, and for a moment gets lost in his own thoughts. He tells her that today he will go out and train alone, and she warns, "Don't overdo it, the weather is terrible." As he walks away, he thinks about how he sharpens his sword every day, and how exactly 10 years have already passed. He wonders if the day will ever come when he can truly use the style of the god demon. But he quickly shakes his head and tells himself that negativity will not help anything. He decides to stay positive and continues to believe. The imagined style is his true calling. Suddenly his gaze catches something and he freezes, struck by thunder. He rushes off and runs to the trees, sure that the strange sound came from deep in the forest. In the depths of the forest, the rain pours wildly unceasingly. The soldier sneaks through the trees, stops for a moment and catches his breath because he notices a young girl lying face down in the mud and cannot believe what he sees. He rushes forward, kneels down and asks if she is okay and why she ended up here in such a storm. Then he notices her bare feet and begins to wonder if she ran away from someone. The girl barely lets out a weak moan, and the soldier tries to keep her close while his gaze sticks to her tear-covered face, tries to understand where she came from. Suddenly, he notices something that makes him freeze in place. A strange energy begins to swirl in the air and suddenly, Solo only sells and at that very moment realizes the rain is literally freezing right before him and he has no idea what is happening. Sold is completely frozen. His eyes widen as he tries to piece the words together, but in the end he just, "No, this cannot be true." He told himself that this whole story could not be happening in reality until he looks at the monster's fangs and does not understand why it appeared here anywhere but here. And then he stands to the death between the girl and the huge shadow. Upon closer inspection, he finally understands. This is not just some monster, but a high-level boss from the end of the game he has already completed. And he starts to spiral, as if he was reborn but not just for no reason. And now the thought gnaws at him, could this chaos be all he gets for his faith? Leaving everything in his new life behind. When the wolf towers over them, he wonders, is his fate only to die here? Never. He thinks about him as if he were something. But he does not believe in that. It is impossible, too cruel for it all to end just like that. So he rushed forward, grabbed the girl, and dove aside, saving her from. A thunderous, icy, explosive wave hits the ground right where they had just stood. They both hit the ground after the explosion. One let out a scream through a groan, and Soul was just trying to piece together what had just happened. Tilty stares him in the eyes and says she is sorry, explaining. The slave traders actually released that monster only a little. Track her catch up once more. She begins to panic and begs Sold. He needs to get out of there immediately so that he doesn't end up suffering because of her. Sold is completely stunned. She breaks down crying, and it is clear this mess has shattered her completely. Just by looking at her face, Sold immediately understands her eyes are the same as. And the greatest threat from that game he loved so much is the legendary villain Tilty Majester. It was the same girl whom everyone hated in the game. She constantly tormented the main hero and committed horrors. The worst part is that in every version of this story, she was destined to lose everything and end in total ruin. After she finished the game, the truth about Tilty's past finally began to come together as a whole. And it turned out that all the people she had ever reached out to with her soul were already dead, so now she was completely alone. She was born the child of a concubine, and because of this, everyone hated her. So she lived in utter poverty until her mother was killed. Then she was captured and forcibly dragged into a life of slavery. Eventually, a noble family from that country appeared and saved her, but the story did not end there. The tragedy was not over, they were all mercilessly slaughtered as well. Tilty grew to the point that she made the whole world turn against her, for she brought only misfortune to the people around her. Soon she simply began to hate herself. when she became the saddest girl in the world later, turning into a villain whom everyone feared. Sold looks at the girl who is sobbing and suddenly realizes she has the same eyes as the villain from the game. He is suddenly struck by the thought, maybe it is he alone with her who is turning her into that monster. Her weight overwhelms him like a ton of bricks. Then he draws his sword and stands right in front of the chained girl to protect her and keep others away. A giant wolf appears and declares that it has finally seen what is going on here, and Saul immediately demands, "What kind of creature is this?" Glancing at the monster, Sold says that this moment is exactly what he was born for. The girl, through tears, raises her gaze to him and says, her name is Tilty. Sold finally understood why he was dragged into this world. He is a nobleman, which means he has the freedom to do whatever he wants. He tells Tilty that he will change her fate. Before the battle, Sold lets out a loud scream from his chest. And Tilty just freezes in complete shock. Her sword begins to glow. Alright, let's release a huge burst of energy. It strikes directly into the giant wolf that is bending down. And it below slowly just watches, standing on the ground like. The light fades and Sold realizes something. At that time he did not know yet, but actually he would. A hidden part of the game is launched, which most players never see. He explains that. This secret to unlock such power is quite specific. You need to deliberately fight with a sword. Stand still, don't move, and take the enemy's blow directly to the head. And most importantly, have a true, desperate need to protect someone. Tilty looks completely stunned. Like. The soul begins to spread throughout the body with this crazy, demonic power. This is the beginning of the demon god style, a technique that transforms his entire being into only a living blade. It stays low to the ground, moves so fast it becomes a solid blur. And with all his might throws the sword upward, shouting about the special strike of the ice wolf, which slashes right into the wolf's snout and cuts the strike. Energy shards fly everywhere as soon as the hit becomes clean. Sold finishes off with a massive blow, drops low and holds position while the power spreads around him. The giant wolf is simply torn apart by the explosive wave of the attack. When the Sold embodiment reveals the secret demon god style it used, it turns out to be the absolute truth. And it starts laughing to itself. Can't believe the legends were real. He sheathes the sword and walks away, stubbornly thinking that all the crazy training he went through was not in vain after all. He goes to Tilty, looks her straight in the eyes and says he is Sword Ranger and she is his destiny. So he unveils what he has transformed into, and therefore the place slides her a huge smile, promises that now everything will be fine, and Tilty begins to cry happy tears. She says she is just glad to be with him so they can change the world together, and she jumps up and throws herself at him with lavish hugs. Seld looks at her and talks about the dark fate waiting for her as a villainess and assures that he just cut off anyone or anything trying to stand in their way. Meanwhile, far away on a dark cliff, a huge castle is struck by thunderstorm blows and lightning roars right inside. Somewhere on the throne sits a man asking if their wolf Fenrir has returned yet. His followers have to deliver bad news. They have heard nothing from either the wolf or the slave trader. Turning back to the dark castle, the masked leader rages madly and orders his followers to find that boy right now because he obsessed with searching for Tilty. He freezes his gaze on the giant skull and wonders where she could have gone. Sitting on a throne of bones, he calls Tilty his beloved sister and makes a promise to himself. He will definitely bring her back home. Meanwhile, the carriage approaches the gamekeeper's estate at night, and the man inside looks as if his long workday has just ended. Garland enters through the front door and exclaims that he is finally home. The family's nanny Boba is already waiting for him. But the soldier runs out to meet him, greets the father, and next to him the family introduces Tilty and lets Garland understand who she is. After that, they deliver the main news. They tell Garland that they want to officially welcome Tilty as a new member of the Ranger family, the very one he is, which may. To confuse him, Garland freezes, looks at Soiled, pure shock on his face, and mumbles what the hell is going on at all. At the estate, all the bustle finally quiets down for Marrow, the wet nurse Baba, and Tilty, who is now safe from her dark past. Now the entire Ranger crew is gathered. Garland is keeping the house under control, and Sold alone keeps his secret that he is a reincarnator. The whole family gathered around the dinner table, while Garland tries to piece together what kind of story this is. And Saul tells how he saved Tilty from the monster and brought her back. He looks his father straight in the eyes so that he doesn't miss a single word. Garland just crosses his arms and silently lets everything pass by. Marrow stares at him and asks if he really thinks that the poor girl's situation is a complete tragedy. The room becomes quieter because they suddenly realize Tilty literally has nowhere to return to. The family is already gone. Soul does not waste time and pleadingly asks Dad to allow her to stay. Garland freezes for a moment, running everything through his head, while suddenly changes tone and gives them a big like. He says there is absolutely no problem and everything will be fine. He winks and explains that good deeds are just a usual part of the work for a noble family. He stands up, officially announcing, from now on her name is Tilty Ranger. Everyone bursts with joy and happily welcomes her. So Soul just smiled to himself and thought that they finally made a real step forward in changing the future. But he knows these stakes. Tilty is the villain from the game Noblesse Fantasia, and it is she who ultimately is destined to be completely destroyed. Everything in this world begins with the game he played in his past life. And he is sure he reincarnated right here to save Tilty once and for all. He knows that to protect her, he cannot leave her for a single step. So when Garland orders to teach her about their home, Soul agrees without hesitation, feeling that their plan to invite her into the family worked exactly as he had hoped. Since she is 9 and she is a year younger than him, Seld smiles broadly and says, he is now her older brother. Tilty's face flushes bright red as she tries to find words in response. But the pressure becomes unbearable and she suddenly rushes out of the room, leaving the answer unfound. He stood as if rooted to the spot, completely stunned, and shouted her name. Later, Garland begins to worry, her face is so frightened. And when Saul finds out, he asks his father-mother if she is being gentle. Meryl promises that she is, even if. Tilty is still sitting behind closed doors and does not speak to any of them. Murao says that most likely Tilty is just trying to cope with her feelings, so she should not be forced. And just be patient. Garland is confident that in time she will open up to them even if she. Now she is struggling with all her might and the family stands nearby staring. Everyone is too focused on all of this. And Saul agrees with Mom. He thinks about how hard it must be for Tilty suddenly finding out that she will have a new family. As the night drags on, Seld initiates the operation to clean up the slave market, the one his father mentioned earlier. Garland explains, a whole bunch of nobles gathered specifically to take on this task. And although they managed to free the slaves and bring them to a safe place, they failed to destroy the entire organization. Sold freezes in place and asks if Tilty was among those affected, and maybe. He brings her to consciousness. Before she was found, she really was just a prisoner, and everything starts to come together for him. That wolf from before was definitely sent by those traitors to pull her back to that slave organization. Sold suddenly realizes how crazy it is that these people actually used the legendary beast Fenrir for this. And he begins to wonder why they had to go through all that to target Tilty specifically. He reflects on the organization hiding behind the slave traders and sees Tilty looking small and scared. And he starts to suspect that they are the ones behind Tilty's doom flag. Returning to this time, Garland stands in the field and signals Sold. It's time to show what he is capable of. Specifically that imagined style. He declares that he is a master and ready to prove it by selling. Under the moonlight, Soul takes a stance, and his father watches intently, not taking his eyes off. He raises the sword high and gathers all the energy, squeezing it to the last drop. In his thoughts, he returns to the moment when he faced Fenrir and first felt the power of ley lines. The same furious bursts of energy wave through his body and through his blade right now. Sold looks his father straight in the eyes and shouts that the legends were actually true. He hints at a secret technique that is believed to be known only to the Ranger family. Sold calls the demon's name in God style and Garland is so shocked that he can't even find words to respond. Sold tries to boast about the trick with the ice wolf, but his wooden sword immediately cracks and breaks right in his hands. Sold begins to panic. The sword broke and his father just stands and looks at him as if he has lost his mind. Garland says he will just buy him a new one, but Sold does not back down, insisting that he is telling the truth about the power. And the truth is this: since that day he has never been able to master that style. He grips the broken handle and realizes this hidden game passage needs a special trigger to work. The plan is simple: quickly find that trigger so he can immediately master the style and keep Tilty safe from new attacks. Also because since then Tilty has been leading a calm life as soon as the Rangers officially took her in. The whole family sits down at the table for a big dinner with pizza. Everyone is in a simply wonderful mood, and Tilty even receives a completely new dress, sewn for her by Murrow, and the family breadwinner cheerfully encourages her. Garland and Saul return from a trip, boasting about a huge fish they caught in a crab trap. But as soon as everyone together starts showering compliments and bursting with delight, Tilty freezes in place, completely stunned by this influx. Suddenly, the whole family's attention focuses on her. She cuts off and runs out of the room, while the others remain there standing stunned. Completely confused, Garland complains that she still isn't ready to open up to him, and Murrow reminds her such things take time and you can't just take and rush forward. He sold them watches, thinking that if they lived together like this, it would be enough to protect everyone. But you can't help but wonder, is it really going to be so easy to avoid a dark future for Tilty? That night, a huge thunderstorm rolls over the house, and lightning slashes the sky. Sold lies awake in bed. He looks at the ceiling and feels Tilty has one really important detail that he stubbornly forgot. The crash of broken glass echoes throughout the house, and Saul's eyes widen sharply just as Saul jumps out of bed, grabs his sword, and rushes forward, replaying in his head what could have made such a loud crack. He immediately understands the sound is coming from Tilty's room. Without wasting a second, he flies there. He abruptly throws open the door, ready for anything that might be lurking on the other side. Inside, complete darkness. And what he sees before him is worse than anything he could have imagined. Sol shouts Tilty's name as soon as he makes out. The window is shattered, and three eerie bat-like monsters circle near her bed. Tilty has curled up into a ball enclosed inside a twisted mass of dark energy. The seller looks at it and tries to figure out what this thing is before realizing it is pure darkness. One-eyed monsters hiss and emit strange sounds, hovering right above her. Sold is completely confused. He doesn't understand why a magical creature appeared here at all. But he doesn't let the shock knock him down. He shouts at Tilty again and draws his sword ready to face them in battle. Sold sobs and rushes forward, trying to use the only weapon he has, but he quickly realizes the sword is still broken and for such a fight it is absolutely unsuitable. The monsters do not slow down. One of them screeches sharply as they circle the room. Sold tries to brush them off with a broken pommel, swearing under his breath and glancing at Tilty again and again. He tells Tilty to endure a little longer while he himself goes to find Dad for help. But she suddenly screams for him to just leave her alone, and this completely throws him off track. Tilty cries and says she is sorry. She says such things have always happened to her. And then she adds that she herself does not understand why all these bad things follow her everywhere. Sold looks at her, feels her pain, and only quietly whispers her name, making a decision. He shouts back that he will never leave her behind because now they are family. Sold stands there completely stunned, realizing that his promise to stay together is a big mistake. Tilty hugs him tightly, trembling with tears, and says that he is the one who saved her. And he tells how his whole family welcomed her with open arms, but even with all this kindness, she was happy only for a moment, and admits that it was because of this happiness that she hesitated. Shadows begin to take over as she screams that it is pointless and that she should not have been here at all. She screams that staying means dragging everyone down, and Soul just stands still until he finally understands. Tilty screams that she will bring them all to ruin, and then continues. Soldil remembers everything from the game. This is the hidden story of the villain from Noblesse Fantasieth part that viewers see after the credits, showing one specific episode from her life via memory from the story he played out earlier. This is the story of a noble family that took Tilty and how they all eventually died because of her. The memory cuts into the very consciousness of the soul. In the original game timeline, his entire family was mercilessly slaughtered. And while he watches Tilty collapse right before him, he finally comprehends the tragedy that still lingers in his memory. He has all this time been about the Ranger family. He freezes and watches as a dark energy swarm surrounds her too, just like back then. Through tears, a scream breaks out as Tilty. She will beg him just drive her away and leave her alone before it's too late. Soul only watches her intently, his face focused to the last limit. In his eyes it is clear has already made his choice. He knows if he just leaves now and stops interfering with Tilty, everything could go differently. Then his family would really have had a chance to survive and avoid being killed. Saving everyone from that terrible ending would mean at least one less tragedy in this world. And the soul does not consider the risk and pulls her into a strong embrace, as if cutting through all the dark shadows. Tilty looks at him in complete shock, barely finding words to ask why he is still holding on. Shadow monsters swarm around the room. A loud, eerie creak rolls through the space in waves. But Soul does not flinch. His gaze is fixed on Tilty even as they approach closely. Tilty struggles in his hands, screams for him to stop, and cries out hotly for him to let her go. But Soul squeezes even tighter, says he will not let go, and that he will never unclench his hands. He asks if it even matters if she makes him unhappy and then tells her she is not alone. Remind her that now they both have parents and that he is there for her. Solode smiles and says that she is already his precious sister, and swears to protect her at the cost of his own life. The words finally reach her and Tilty simply breaks down, uncontrollably sobbing, pressing against his chest. Through heavy sobs, she barely manages to squeeze out, "Thank you." She finally calls him her older brother, and the dark energy begins to retreat from the room. Sold looked down at Tilty and called her name, noticing the eerie dark energy finally disappeared from the room. The person's eyes widen sharply. The first sight shocks her completely, because everything turned around so quickly. Tilty finally stops struggling and simply lets the tears flow freely. Now, she looks much calmer than a moment ago. She looked at him with a gentle smile and sighed with relief. He really managed to reach her and stop the darkness. He thinks to himself, even if he doesn't fully understand what kind of dark force it was, one thing he knows for sure: if it brings only trouble, he won't allow it. Just as he managed to exhale, his parents burst into the room. Dad growled, asking what was wrong with Tilty, and Mom glanced at Soul and snapped a question: what the hell just happened? And Soul stands motionless, looks both of them straight in the eyes and declares that he needs a new sword. On his face a collected, focused expression while he explains he must become much stronger than he is now. He tells them that he will protect Tilty at any cost, and that he himself will cut down any darkness that tries to ruin her life. Mother just stands and looks completely surprised, while Father can't help but show a barely noticeable smile. It's clear that the boy's determination impresses him. Sold's father nods. He will get him a cool custom sword and sold beams, sincerely thanking him. They stop and look at the city sword guest, and father says he intends to introduce him to the best blacksmith everywhere. Then several men in suits run out of the shop and shout that they will never return. Smith doesn't even worry. He stands with a hammer and half indifferently throws out good riddance, because fashion is all that really matters to them. She adjusts her glasses and starts a conversation about how much she hates the nobles, and the boss just watches confident that he will overcome her and win. Determined to get a new blade, that guy from Nilya Sold sets off Stagaringtoder with his father, straight to the city Gust. The city is large, it stretches along the road as far as their sight reaches. The streets are crowded with people, and carriages rush in all directions wherever possible. Sold says it is incredibly lively here, and his father explains. This is a major trade hub both for land and sea, but he immediately warns. As long as two noble families hold the city, these crowds also attract quite a few rather suspicious types. Sold's father lowers his gaze and orders Tilty to watch so she doesn't get lost in the crowd. She nervously nods and quietly promises that everything will be fine. Sol reaches forward and takes her hand, hinting without extra words. You just need to hold on to each other so you don't get lost among all these people. Tilty looks up at him and smiles widely. She blushes slightly as she thanks the soul of her older brother for watching over her. The salesman only smiled in response, but in his thoughts noted how recently she had finally warmed up to him. As they make their way through the noisy market, he remembers how she actually asked to be taken with him on this trip, and it was a huge help because he really wants to be by her side all the time to watch that she stays safe, wherever they go. But as soon as they set off, both stopped as if rooted to the spot. They were shocked when they saw what was happening on the street. The street vendor simply ignites fire magic with his finger and grills meat as if it were an ordinary thing. And the children are even playing tag while shooting fire and water at each other. And high above them, a girl flies on a broom through the sky to deliver a few bags. The city is literally soaked with magic. Some vendors grill snacks with their fingers, children shoot it all around just for fun, and because of this it becomes quite clear, in the world of noblesse fantasia, having magic is as ordinary a thing as daily routine is for most people. But it's also visible that he stands and clenches his fist so tightly. Both his father and Tilty see he's a little upset, he feels left out. Then his father says not to worry, not everyone is born for magic, and Sol just nods, thanking him. Holding the hilt, he insisted that he didn't need magic as long as he had a sword. Ultimately, the style of the Demonsky God-Axe sword, which he teaches, has its own unique and crazy power. Even if he has to admit to himself, he is still far from truly mastering it. His father loves this confidence and tells them both, keep moving so you can finally pick up the new equipment. They reach a large old-fashioned workshop. A huge sign with a sword hangs right above the entrance door. And the father shouts hello, and Sold looks around, wondering if it is even open because no one answers. Inside the shop, a loud voice breaks the silence. They are too loud, so he asks who is there. Then Sold's dad, as if by command, officially introduces himself, Baron Gallant Ranger. Inside, an unfamiliar face sharply replies the nobility can just disappear. Such a phrase completely throws his father off balance. The father hurriedly tries to pull everything together and explain. The master blacksmith forged a sword for him long ago. He says this hastily, trying so that the door finally opens and out comes a stern woman with a huge hammer, just the sight of whom is unsettling. She directly states that the old man is dead, and that since she is now in charge, they only have to get out. Dad starts to ask if she is the master's child, but she simply says her name is Frey and turning away sends them off, see ya. Sold spoke aloud and told her that he was actually looking for his own sword. Frey looks around and throws an angry sidelong glance at him, calls him a cheeky noble bastard and orders, let him just go ask his dad to buy him a toy sword. Sold freezes. They were directly struck by the insult, and he doesn't even manage to say anything in response. The door slams shut with a bang and the whole group freezes in the dust. Sold already understands. Provoking the necessary event to get a high-level weapon won't be so easy. For now, his father presses on his chest with stress. He apologizes, saying he didn't know the blacksmith's daughter had moved and taken over the workshop. He thinks they should just find another place, even if he's not sure there are forges in the city that can really handle it at a sufficient level. But Betts is not going to give up. He tells his father he wants to try again, although the latter insists it's a bad idea. The boy just smiles and says it's okay, because in fact he just wants to talk to her properly. The father manages to negotiate. He agrees to go look for other shops and then asks Tilty what she is doing. Tilty just sighs and decides to stay here with her older brother. The two of them stand before the closed door. Tilty looks too scared and asks why that woman behaved so terribly just then. It seems Sol is not worried at all. Hesh just asks if she managed to see what was inside the shop since it was hidden. And inside there were plenty of rough, heavy swords with a real combat character, and this convincingly proved that she was not a charlatan. At first glance at the swords hanging on the wall, it becomes clear. They are worn, bulky, as if they have not yet been brought into order. But the swords are able to sense something special in this. As blades, there is something that simply draws him inside. He immediately returns to the forge where Frey works and tells her that he really wants to have a proper conversation. While Frey turns around, Tilty shakes behind his back and he, all irritated, scolds them, saying you can't just barge in like that. And Dush replies that he has a request. He offers his own sword, showing her exactly how the guard is bent, and Frey raises her goggles to see better. Sold directly tells her he needs a powerful sword, one that will not break even when he fights at full strength. Frey just looks at him confused like someone scalded and blurts out, "Who the hell is he anyway?" He answers that his name is Sold and that this weapon is needed to keep his sister safe. But before they manage to finish talking, voices come from the door, asking if this is the same place that once drove them out. A giant in armor named Mobrib breaks down the entrance, stomps on the threshold, and roars that he acts under the orders of Lord Walger Debbie Hip, demanding the sword be made right now. Sold exclaims in surprise. The mood suddenly breaks, and his hair is already tousled. She rubs her head and mutters that it's just one misfortune after another on this cursed day. Mobrib stands on the ground near the door, but Frey does not back down. She says that her father never forged swords only for luxurious snobs. The tall man gets angry, leans closer and shouts that her husband definitely once forged a sword for Lord Walger. Frey falls silent, lowers her gaze. The shadow falls on her face with darkness. She quietly admits, he is right, her father did forge, but thank you very much. Thank you very much, thank you very much, thank you very much. Thank you very much, 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 thank you very much. Thank you very much, 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 thank you very much. Thank you very much, 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 thank you very much. The dark reason for this. She tells how Walger threatened her father, insisting that he would do everything to save his daughter, that the spirit carries her back to a time when she was still a child. She remembers how her father taught her the craft every day each day while she remained a child. Whenever he raised a cry that a sword is not just a beautiful decoration for the eyes, he always repeated one thing: the blade is made only for battle. And every time he pointed a finger at those bizarre, useless types of weapons and warned. She was never and under no circumstances allowed to do anything just for show. He ordered her to forge only those swords in which she truly believed, and almost begged her not to repeat his own mistakes. Fred stops his gaze on the memory of working by the anvil. His words echo again in her mind. The sword is power. The faith he held until the very end. Freud remembers his dad and calls him a stupid old man. Everything he gave away was only to protect her. And she finally understands. That is why she needs to make a real choice now. Frey shouts that she has embraced the spirit of her father to her heart and looks absolutely ready. Standing her ground, she clenches the hammer and swears she will never forge anything again, but only those true battle blades she believes in. Tilty and Soul just stared at her completely amazed as they saw her find her spark again. But Mabriabria just gives her a crooked smile and holds herself as if speaking of ancient times, implying swords are almost useless nowadays. He starts talking about how magic is the only thing that truly matters and insists a single mage can easily take down 100 sword-wielding guys. For him, a blade is just a fake magical staff or a shiny ornament that a nobleman wears for show. Mabra bursts out shouting, grabs Freya by the collar sharply and tosses her up while screaming that no one needs real weapons anymore. He leans closer and says that Walger expects great achievements from her thanks to her father's old skills, so she better shut up and get to work. Mabra blooms among the ruins and whispers a question. Does she really want this to be threatened the same way? And just the thought of it. She is raised in despair while trapped, but suddenly Soldly steps forward and shouts at the boy, stop. And by this makes it clear, if anyone here really needs a real sword for battle, it's him. Mabra just looks at him completely stunned that this kid is standing up for her. Dobrib is not impressed at all. He looks down at the grieving one and wonders why some random brat allows himself to respond like that. The night shakes without any pausing. The columns roar as they fly in all directions, scattering junk around the room. Tilty screams terribly and calls for her brother, who Mabrib orders to watch the tongue one more time and he will simply kill it. Soldier sharply crashes onto the floor, grabs his chest, and feels like a complete idiot for having lost vigilance so easily. He raises his gazy eyes wide open with surprise because Tilt stands right in the face of the night and shouts at it not to be angry with her older brother. Tilty is hysterical. She cries and screams that she will never forgive anyone who hurts her older brother. She looks. The ex-girlfriend is completely shocked when Mabrib grabs her and asks, does she want to die together with him? One of the soldiers manages to get up and grabs one of the heavy sabers from the floor in the shop. Frey yells at him to put down the sword. But he despises her and assumes the perfect combat stance, lifting the huge weapon so easily as if it weighs nothing. His gaze is sharp and cold. He orders the knight to immediately take its hands off his sister before He just seems to stand there and look confused at how does this kid, without moving at all, manage to move such a heavy blade. Tilty screams and calls for his brother, but Mabrib only whines. Supposedly he sold some crap. And stares at him through the helmet, asking if the guy even understands the mess he's making. Not waiting for an answer, the knight rushes straight at him and shouts that he doesn't care if he dies. Mabrib laughs and says he can't complain, a giant fiery blast is unfolding right before him. He still holds on. Utility, but instead of words, his own screams consume him as the heat from the explosion draws nearer. Sold remains completely calm amid the chaos, because he begins to feel what was right before his eyes. And at the very moment he swings, a strange sensation takes root within him. It is the power of Fenrir, the demonic beast he fought, and now he feels it. He fills his own body to the brim with energy. It looks like he's about to put a full stop. He swings the massive blade and pushes forward a heavy wave of power. The shock pressure tears the air and scatters everything around into emptiness. Then he played the sale of stakes, shouted his move, the wolf flared up and sharply cut through the knight's defense. Mabrib is raging and shouting about the hand, not understanding what the hell is happening with that sword. Mabrib is completely exhausted after the blow, while Frey holds the rear safe and Sold stands his ground. In his thoughts, the sword is essentially pure power. And he shouts that this is exactly the power needed to protect the people he cares about. Frey is frozen from what she saw what the boy just did, and Tilty is glowing. She knows that this is the end for the villains. Mabrib groans in pain and his buddy with glasses is panicking, shouting his name while these two decide to get out of here as quickly as possible. Mabrib swears as he rushes, and his assistant begs him to wait, but he disappears, leaving him abandoned. Sold and Tilty remain alone. Tilty rushes into his arms and thanks her older brother for everything. He just quickly checks if she is okay, and she is so fired up that she says, that move exactly the same as he used to do before. Soul just smiles and nods, finally putting everything together because he remembers the fight with that giant wolf Fenrir, exactly the same as back then. And it happened again as soon as Mabrib grabbed her. Everything falls into place in his head. And he understands, striving to save Tilty is the very secret that reveals the Majin style. He is just glad she is safe. The cheap saber finally gives out, it cracks and breaks right off the hilt. Tilty begins to panic, shouting that the sword just shattered into pieces. Sold looks at the useless hilt and says that this blade didn't work either. He just comes to the conclusion. An ordinary sword is simply not made to withstand the magical style. Both children shudder when they realize Frey is standing right here, looking at them with her arms crossed over her chest while she just stares at them intently and mercilessly, giving them goosebumps. The seller and Tilty immediately start bowing and apologizing, saying they are so sorry that they broke one of her sabers. Frey orders them not to worry and promises that she will actually make him a new one. She says this so confidently that it completely confuses him. She only gives him a small smile and, having spoken these words silently, freezes as if listening to her own thoughts. When her father still worked at Anvil, he once explained to her, a sword is power, and added, it is the very power a person needs to fight, and at the same time remain faithful to everything they believe in. Frey sees how everything is sold and understands. Her verdict is a real matter. She desires power to protect what matters, so she decides to make a blade worthy of it. And she tells him directly that she will make a mighty sword that will not break no matter how hard he strikes with it. She confidently winks at them, gives a thumbs up and promises she personally will be the one to get the job done. Soldier cannot hold back a smile, stubbornly thinks that he finally has a weapon that can handle his demon god style, and happily thanks it. Both boys start shouting words of gratitude to her, and she pretends to hold herself like an adult, ordering them to drop the formality and just call her Frey. The idea of the new weapon worked. He sped it up as soon as he realized this is exactly what is needed to rise to a completely new level of power. Next to the huge mansion at the other end of the city, from the outside everything looked different, but things there are not going so well. There someone stands with a hand on a bandage, while Lord Walger shouts that any soldier who loses to a child is dismissed on the spot. Knight begins to panic and begs her master to listen, insisting that the kitty she fought cannot be called a mere petty troublemaker. He explains, the boy practices fencing that looks like pure magic, and adds that the girl with silver hair, their number 2, left Walger completely stunned. Returning to the estate, Lord Walger repeats the same news about the girl with silver hair, and his Magokde henchmen laugh. Finally, everything is getting interesting. A loud scream full of pure shock bursts from the forge and rolls all the way to the street. She cannot believe her ears and shouts that Frey will not be able to forge a sword, and Tilty just looks at her confused and asks what the reason is. Frey remains calm and simply says the same thing again. She cannot fake this weapon for them right now. She asks Saul if it is true that he cannot use any magic, and he answers, yes, that is the whole reason why he works so hard on his fencing. Frey raises a finger and pokes it right in the face, stating that his own fencing style is actually the biggest problem they have to deal with. She says that once, when she watched him use that icy ice wolf flash technique, she felt something deep inside his moves. It felt as if it contained a colossal amount of demonic energy, and after that she begins to speak further. That he essentially uses a magical style, a way of fighting that relies on the true power of a demon. She recalls an old scroll where the style itself was described allowing this dark power to live in your body, so you can turn your entire soul into a living blade. Frey explains, some fighters wield swords as if they were magical staffs, casting spells directly from the blade. And although Sold used the power of ice, she notes that at first it was all simple saber programming. But later everything changed when he actually transformed the saber itself into pure magic to pull off his trick. Essentially, he turns not only the technique, but all the weaponry into ice, pushing the move to the limit. She picks up the broken hilt and tells the children that her ordinary swords simply can't handle this task. She admits she never specially made them to withstand such stress or that style of fighting. Panic begins and Sold asks what they should do next, but Frey does not panic and says, the answer is simple. She explains that they only need to find materials strong enough to withstand his power, and both children continue to wonder for a long time what exactly she means. Frey recalls a story her father once told her about a special stone. It really comes from another world. A place known as Magic Dimension is a dungeon world filled with magical beasts and overflowing with mana. Frey explains that special ore they found in that dimension is so strong that it can withstand any demonic power. She freezes for a moment. It sounds as if she was just struck by shock, and repeating the name of the stone to herself, whispers it again. Solda is boiling with excitement, wanting to know exactly which stone it is, but Frey throws him a look and orders him to be silent. Finally, Frey names their find. What they are looking for is called Monostone. When night falls on the noisy city streets, this group decides to return to where they stopped. They go all the way back to get food and finally discuss everything without haste. Solda's father nodded while listening and then only realized they need a legendary sword to truly embody that magical style. Saul asks if he has such a weapon, will his special fighting style really become a reality? Saul admits that maybe yes, but says they still need a magic stone. And Solda's father immediately bursts out laughing because this moment of conversation turned out incredibly well. As soon as the guy realizes the true price of the magic stone, he suddenly swears, and he splashes the drink everywhere. Dad Soiled is still recovering after the blow. He wheezes when he asks if they are really serious about this. Soiled looks around and scrutinizes him whether his old man is holding on or about to lose it. And the father just looks back with a tense face and tells the two of them that what they are asking for is beyond their reach. Then he begins to explain. Magic stones are ultra-rare items that you can't even find for sale on the general market. It turns out, even a tiny fragment of something like this is more expensive than the most precious jewels in the world. Saul has gone completely quiet somewhere, just recalling Frey's words that they are impossible to find. His father holds reality in his hands and says that this definitely won't happen now, but he promises he will try to find another way to get them what they need. Night covers the city and the camera slides to the reality of the monasteries. Back then, when all this was just a game, they were famous for being incredibly hard to find. When Sold and Tilty settled into their beds for the night, Sold began to think how much easier it was in the game. There he just had to chase money. He stared at the ceiling and feels the pressure of it all because attempts to realize the plan in real life turn into a complete headache. Tilty rolls onto his side and says he really hopes Sold can get these stones. Sold just looks around, smiles, and replies that he hopes for the same. As soon as they settled down, Tilty quietly calls Sold. He looks around a little confused and wonders what has happened to him. When she gives him a huge smile, thanks him for saving her, and says that he really looked cool then. She quietly giggles to herself and wishes him good night, then calls him big brother and walks away. He lay sprawled out, and an incredible blush burned on his face, and he was extremely satisfied with everything that had happened. Looking at the moon, he thinks, if she is such a sweet villain, then he is ready to do anything. At that moment, he made a vow to himself. He will go through any struggle to make her happy. We undertake to find a way to deliver those magic stones the very next day. In the morning, Freycon sold them the sword she had been repairing for him and promised to wait for their return. When the farewells ended, the group jumped into their cart and set off on the long road back to the soldiers' settlement. And Solda's father looks a bit depressed after the trip, apologizes that they still didn't get the new sword today. Sold's father is still gloomy because of the sword, but Saul leaves everything for later. Don't worry. He is just glad that there is finally a clear plan for what to do next. So Dad returns to Tilty and asks if she was able to relax even a little after all this chaos. She gives him a wide smile and says definitely yes. For now, he kept telling himself that everything was going perfectly. No matter the problems he felt, all the necessary events had already been set in motion to finally get that sword. Everything is quiet and calm until suddenly a gigantic explosion tears the side of the carriage. The driver flies into the air as Sold's father roars at the top of his lungs, and Tilty screams wildly in terror. Sold reaches out to grab her, but the whole world suddenly burns with fire and smoke. and the cart is already completely broken. While it smokes and smolders on the roadside, a pair of booted steps appear in the frame. Dogra opens up, he shouts as if he himself hit the target. He calls his men, forward to the attack, and the rest of the bandits get fired up, springing into action at the shout, shouting his name. The bandits tighten the circle around the smoking ruins of the carriage, swords in hand, ready. And Dogra climbs into this mess and pulls out Tilty, holding her by the collar from behind. He laughs and tells the team that they have finally gotten the treasure they were hunting for. Looking at the unconscious girl, he says that he is going straight back to Lord Valgar's estate to return her. Dogger throws to the team, "We're moving out, cleanup is on you," and the bandits growl in response that they can handle it. Sold and his father collapsed onto each other and completely lost it after the explosion. They were totally thrown off track. He walks through the silence of the forest, pressing the bag to his shoulder, and Dogra cannot come to his senses. "I still can't believe it, she's just a little child." At first it seems that the power cannot be so insane, until he realizes that it is the power of darkness. Later, a voice rolls through the crystal ball and informs Valgar and Dogra. Stealing that very power is Titan's main goal. Walgar lies flat on the ground and nervously whispers to his master, "Could it be that they are really talking about the power of darkness?" A voice echoes from the ball, "This power is huge, terrible, one that knows no hesitation." He says there is one person capable of connecting to a power strong enough to conquer the whole world. And Tilty's brother looks coldly while saying, "This is exactly what it means to be a priestess of darkness." The master reminds Walgar he has already missed twice, failing to catch the girl, and the knight groans in shame. Walgar looks as if he is about to burst out of his place. He replays in his head how that girl managed to escape after she killed her mother the first time. Then Dagoa remembers how she escaped the second time, even when they unleashed Fenrir on her. A voice from the arena reminds Walgar this is already his third shot at this, and two of them fall to their knees and bow their heads. He looks through the glass as if through the master's eye, and gives them a direct order to take back the target at any cost. And Walgar begins to panic, shouts that he will do everything, and demands, "Everyone leave, let them leave this to him." The master tells him, if he really pulls this off, the master will give him some of that dark power so that he will have it too. Walgar starts laughing, says what a great honor it is, and promises that this time they will definitely catch them. Meanwhile, Tilty wakes up and again utters the name Priestess of Darkness. It sounds completely confused, and confusedly asks where she is. Dagoro, who pressed her under the armpit, orders her to shut up if she doesn't want to die. She doesn't listen and starts crying, shouting to find out what happened to her father and brother. Dogra just stands still with that disgusting smile on his face and lets out a quiet sound, before cold-bloodedly telling Tilty that he himself killed her family. That look on Tilty's face says it all. She is completely stunned by this news. She starts screaming at the top of her lungs, the forest echoes. And Doggo just carries her through the thickets like a suitcase, grumbling that she makes too much noise and needs to be quiet. She can't even help it, she only sobs and lets out a loud scream of pain, so Dagura gets even angrier, sharply jerks her, although he already told her to be quiet. And then he stops in the middle of a phrase, completely confused by what he sees. Dark energy begins to swirl from the ground like water, and Dagura loses control. He screams for everyone to know what the hell is going on, as Tilty looks up with tears in her eyes and says she will make it unbearable for everyone. Dagura completely solidifies, realizing that the power rising from her is much greater than he expected. Tilty completely encloses herself with this insane dark energy until it begins to noticeably transform. And Dagura feels the darkness melting and flowing straight into him, and his eyes turn completely black. The power tears through his hands, and the veins swell and bulge outward. He says it's incredible and lets out a giant roar, his muscles double in size, so he shouts that darkness is absolutely the best, and Tilty swallows a huge vortex of black energy. From the side it finally becomes clear. Her darkness is not just present, it amplifies the power, which is why they want her. The dog hisses and laughs like a maniac. What the hell is this kid even doing here? He demands an answer about what happened to all his people down the hill, and Soul remains focused. Although he snorts and gasps, the thought still gnaws. He was too careless. He didn't even suspect they were so aggressive, especially after his father was already knocked down by the cart. Solda's father lies face up near the cart and keeps replaying one thing in his head, how he really missed the moment and now is unprepared. Even with wounds, he raises his gaze upward and decides enough pretending to be polite. No more mercy, he will show it no longer. These guys, meanwhile, he sold the locks, understanding the simple truth. It doesn't matter when it happens or against whom he moves, because if anyone ever thinks to touch Tilty, he will make them regret it. He is completely focused on the threat. And with a gaze full of rage, he swears to himself to cut down each of them to the last one. Dagura just laughs at the boy, standing before a huge vortex of dark energy, and says that Moblib was right. He is special. Then he warms up his muscles in enhancement mode and orders Saul not to underestimate him, even calling him a little shit. He flies straight into Saul's face with a bad smile, shouting that the Priestess of Darkness now belongs to the Titans and more. He will take care of her properly, and it's already clear he already has some nasty conspiracy prepared in advance. Meanwhile, Tilty screams and shadows swallow her. Dagura laughs, saying she is essentially just a human drug to fuel their power. Saul says not a word. He just tightens his sword and moves forward his gaze as if he has played enough already. Dagoa loses self-control and shouts at the boy to burn to ashes, then delivers a giant blow enhanced with dark energy to the limit. But it's sold too fast. He rushes, blurring in motion, and swings the blade as if flying past the target it means nothing, just a moment. And before that, the Great still manages to react. Sickle shots cut through the air and knock him off his feet right up to the very word, thank you. It's a dog or he completely freezes in place, caught in the middle of a swing while the air around him cools. Just as he sells and walks away again, then begins to sheath his sword. Dagoa stands completely bewildered and asks what just happened. But then he starts to panic, releasing a pitiful whimper as the ice slowly climbs up his body. He cries and begs to stop, but the frost moves too fast, so he can no longer do anything. In a matter of seconds, he is almost buried under the ice. He barely squeezes out a last whisper for help, and fear flashes in his eye. Sold sheathes his sword, finishes the wrapping, and steps back. The twisted ice wolf in a flash turns Doga into a human icicle. Sold holds a cold gaze, as if emphasizing one thing to everyone. He has not a drop of mercy for anyone who messes with Tilty. While Dagoa stands like a statue, his face completely embedded in an ice block. Walking away from the mess, Saldi Galavi moved toward a huge sphere spinning with dark energy, and extends both hands, giving a gentle smile, while on the move repeating to the one inside that everything is fine now. He calls Tilty and orders her to come closer, while she looks out from the darkness with tearful eyes. And she loses herself, chokes on tears, and calls for her older brother, just as she finally breaks through the darkness. She lunged forward and clung to him, pulling him into a giant embrace, and he immediately caught her on the spot. Pressing her tightly to himself, Soul says, no matter how scary and hopeless it may be for her, he promises he will definitely save her and never let her down. Tilty cries incessantly, pressing her forehead against her own chest, while telling him to hold on and not let the darkness take over him. Sold presses her to himself and holds her as close as possible, then says he regrets everything, and she only hugs him tightly in response, still not letting go, and thanks him, the older brother, for saving her just before her body completely faints in his arms. As soon as Sold realizes she has fainted from stress again, he suddenly sees. She looks exactly the same as last time it happened. And he stands still, Titans spinning in his head. He knows they are still out there somewhere, hunting that dark power. Suddenly voices come from the forest. They tell how he defeated Dagora with one blow. That surprise is sold as the appearance of a whole pack of armored knights. They come out into view and announce that they are from the House of Hartman. The chief knight says they came to take Sold back, but he is not taken, and then he directly asks what the hell this is. Unconcealedly, what happens next? The scene cuts to a huge estate which rises silently under the moonlight. It turns out House Hartman is one of the two largest noble families, holding the city of Gus in their hands. The knights introduce the boy as Lord Sold, son of the Ranger family, while everyone watches. The group approaches the Hartman estate. The master meets them by the table and greets the seller, saying it is finally a pleasure to meet. He introduces himself, Reich Hartman, head of the entire family, and while he stands there and looks attentively by the beds where Sold's father and sister lie resting, he explains that he has already called a doctor to examine them. He tells Sold that now he can finally rest peacefully, they are safe, but the child does not take his eyes off Tilty. Suddenly it becomes clear to him. Relaxing is the last thing he can allow himself now, and even the very thought of it seems completely impossible. The reason why he is all on edge is simple and inevitable. While he looks at Reich, it dawns on him. This guy is a character from the game Noblesse Fantasia who, that is, he runs into one of the main characters of the original story. And this is truly a huge problem. Because inside the game world, Reich is the exact person who it was destined to stand against and put an end to the villain with the help of Tilty. Sold sits on the couch and looks as if he is about to snap. He knows that Reich and his family were supposed to become enemies much later in the game, so their timing does not match at all. And even though he considers it right to save them, he cannot stop himself from worrying about what is really happening behind the scenes. He again replays in his mind those three knights in the forest, those who claim they were there just to take him, and ponders. Why do they manage to appear exactly at that perfect moment to save the day? It sounds way too convenient. Glancing at Reich, who was sitting there, and next to him a soldier standing guard, he realized this is the main turning point in the events. Sold remembers from the game, Reich is a brilliant tactician who always thinks 3 steps ahead. And he knows for sure, this guy is not the type who goes around helping people just out of kindness. He is struck by the realization. By saving Tilty's life, Reich completely rewrote her fate and created a whole new timeline. The Tilty family survives instead of being destroyed, so Reich meets her as a child, rather than encountering her at the academy years later. Looking at Reich's calm face, the soldier could not help but wonder what exactly this master tactician was going to do next. Reich explains that his family is relentlessly watching Dagura, the very guy who was just defeated. So all this. For the guy, this is a real shock. But as soon as the words hit the ground, everything falls into place. Dagura is actually the boss of the city's criminal underworld. So it's no wonder that this guy got involved in a dirty, heavy business smuggling and human trafficking. And even though Reich has tried more than once before to bring him to justice, he is never caught every time accusations arise. His powerful backing destroys them before anything can move forward. When Sold asks what he means by backing, Reich just looks at him very sternly and confirms it. Behind all this stands Walger Debihip, the head of a noble family that rules the city side by side with the Hartmans. Just mentioning it brings to mind how Walger's thugs aggressively demanded a custom sword, and how this once nobleman even threatened Frey to force her father to back down again. They concluded he is simply a huge villain who uses the city's residents to line his own pockets. Wright lowers his gaze and admits, even when everything looks grim, there is no real evidence linking the nobleman to Dogger's gang. He yells at one of his knights, the knight gets heated and shouts that everyone in the city already knows. This guy is a complete piece of shit. That night someone orders him to quiet down, and Reich adds, knowing the truth doesn't matter if no one can actually do anything about it. Soldier freezes and looks away to the side, finally begins to understand how deeply corruption has burrowed into this city. And he looks straight into the eyes and asks if his plan is real, finally to take down Walger once and for all. At first Reich doesn't say a word, only drinks in the sharp, tense gaze of the boy through his glasses. At night they just stand behind and look completely baffled by the child's blunt question. Saul doesn't stop and keeps insisting. Supposedly, Reich most likely has been watching Dogra all this time to gather evidence and bury the nobleman. And Reich sees how much the boy has already understood, and a small smile barely appears on his face. He tells Sol that he is genuinely surprised because the boy is absolutely right about everything. Reich explains, on the surface, the Hartman and Divichip families are supposed to rule the city together in complete harmony, but he admits all this is just a big spectacle. And the truth is that both families are simply waiting for the perfect moment to destroy each other. Reich says that his family has always grown side by side with the town of Hughes. And while his knights look on proudly, he says that the people who live here are the true treasure of his home. So he makes them understand, if they want to protect everyone, they cannot lose to someone like Walger. Saul sits with tea and freezes in amazement. This guy, it seems, Reich, nothing but surprises. The boy involuntarily recalls, in the original game, Reich always looks sarcastic and cynical. And he also remembers the order that Reich once gave, to show absolutely no mercy to any enemies of Hartman House. He looks at him and thinks, maybe this guy is actually just an extremely passionate person inside. Or maybe all this time, he was just doing his duty as a young lord with all his might. Reich orders Saul to confirm the guy he beat Dagora was really chasing after his sister. Saul answers yes. And he also says that the dog somehow returned the sister, but this matter supposedly belongs to a group called Titan. Reich declares that he already predicted this, which seems to throw his knights off track. Saul is puzzled about what exactly he means. And Titan is shown as a huge shadow organization that secretly controls everything in the global underground. No one knows when they started and who is really behind the wheel. It is a dangerous group wrapped in complete secrecy. Reich remains serious and admits, even then he had a bad feeling that Walger was involved with those people. He says that Walger intends to use the Sold sister for certain reasons, and handing it over without a doubt would help Walger rise in the rankings and become closer to the organization. If that happens, corruption in the city will only flourish and everything will turn into bloody chaos, where no one will be safe. Reich stands still and swears that he will not allow this, so they need to act quickly to stop him. Reich stands by the window with his back to Saul and says he has a proposal for him, and Sold repeats his words back, at first a little surprised, until he realizes that this proposal is the reason for everything. Reich addressed them first. He looks Sold straight in the eyes and sharply asks what the real point is. Memory immediately shifts into a complete nightmare. The city is being robbed and set on fire by bandits. Inside the house, Tilty's mother orders her to run away, while she stays behind to buy a little time. She warns her a terrible darkness is approaching and that they are coming for her. But still she runs her hand over Tilty's face and says that she is okay, even if this very darkness wounds her. She promises that someday light will definitely appear and erase all this darkness forever. So Tilty must move forward no matter what, no matter how bad it gets. Even when she screams, calls for her mother, and chokes on tears. Tilty suddenly wakes up in bed, tears in her eyes, and calls for her mother after that terrible dream. Tilty finally opens her eyes, but immediately confusedly realizes she does not know exactly where she is. The doctor by the bed quietly says that she has already regained consciousness and explains. They are now at the heart minute stage. Tilty shifts her gaze to the neighboring bed and sees her father. She bursts out screaming, calls his name, and shouts to him, but the nurse sternly orders her to calm down. She adds, "As long as Tilty stays silent and rests a bit, everything will be fine." Looking at the large house under the moonlight, Tilty asks where her brother has gone. The nurse replies that he is currently busy, apparently, having conversations with Lord Rake, the head of this house. In the corridor, a firm step is heard as if it emerged from nowhere at that very moment. When he was needed the most, he was simply there right in front of her, no matter what happens. And Tilty realizes what her mother promised her. He is really here to protect her. She rushes to the office, throws open the door, and shouts her older brother's name at the top of her voice. Nearby, she notices a souled seller who is frozen in place and involuntarily thinks, he is the light that saved her. But as soon as the word sold sounds, her mood is cut like a knife. Tell the Lord that he must invite the Hartman family to take Tilty in and protect her. Tilty stands there as if frozen. She is absorbed in the thought that she will simply be left behind and is completely unprepared for what happens next. Tears well up in her eyes. She looks at him and asks, what is he even talking about? He only briefly looks at her and says that the timing of her arrival was actually perfect. Saul raises his gaze, completely stunned by what he sees in the doorway, and calls Tilty by name. Like sits quietly at the table and explains to Tilty, her father is resting now and he has already figured out the situation with Sold. Without unnecessary words, he warns, Walger, the city's business card, is specifically hunting Tilty. He adjusts his glasses and admits, the threat really exists, but it is still unclear why that guy is hunting her. After all, Walger is high-ranking nobility, so he is one of those who can easily frame her for false crimes to get his way. The situation is worse than they assumed. If Walger goes after her, he is capable of destroying the entire Ranger town. Tilty and Sold stand remain in placid absolute silence until the danger finally reaches them with all its weight. Like explains, this is the real reason why the Hartman family wants to invite her. Only this way can she be protected from him. He looks her straight in the eyes and makes it clear, he does this not only to be polite to her. Because this deal is actually about one thing, to protect all the people she lives with at home from being caught in crossfire. Tilty is completely stunned by the news, barely manages to squeeze out any words from her mouth. She shifts her gaze to Sold with tears in her eyes and calls her older brother, not knowing what to do. Sold stands still and insists that he finally sees what game he has been forced into. He notes that although this proposal looks like it was made to help them, it actually has a much bigger purpose in mind, which ensures that he sits in a stronger position than Walger. By keeping Tilty under the Hartman family roof, they hold the one person Walger is ready to grasp with bare hands. And for Walger as a man, can there be anything more irritating than being stuck in such a place? Because Walger wants Tilty returned to him safely, his hands are effectively tied. That's the point. He cannot afford any dirty maneuvers or get into a fight with the Hartmans, otherwise he will lose everything. Sold realizes everything here is actually under control. It's him. He can be as aggressive as he wants, and Walger just has to sit and swallow it. Sold looks into his gaze and clearly understands. That guy sees him only as a bargaining chip. He catches himself thinking that the sold-out one reads him through, and through so he will have to stay alert, especially near the child. Tilty just stands still and looks completely confused while the two of them discuss her future. And Sold begins counting in his head, thinking only about how to protect her. He dreams whether this is the right step, truly leaving her with forgetting and going his own way. Or he tries to protect her with his own strength but still comes to the conclusion, the best bet now is to accept the deal. He clenches his fist, stopping his thoughts on one thing, which path will truly make her happy and whether he can be that support at all. Finally, he lowers his head and says it as if he understands everything, asking only one thing, to take good care of his sister. Tilty bursts into sobs and calls him, asks why it happened this way and why he is leaving her alone. Soul does not utter a single word, only looks down, hiding his face in the shadows while he weighs his choice. As a promise, the Hartman family will protect Tilty with everything they have. Sold lowered his head and said, thank you. He says he has one condition before they finalize everything. With a huge smile, Sold immediately asks Tilty to take him to work right on the spot, leaving Tilty completely stunned beside him. Just step down back to him and stands, completely stunned by the child's request. Even the night in the background cannot hide how much it shocks them. Sold thinks about the promise he made to himself. He knows that it is up to him to protect her. And Tilty finally breaks into a huge, happy smile as soon as she looks at him. Soul confidently winks at her as if to say, everything is under control. Freezes for a moment and just watches how the two of them interact until he finally barely smiles and repeats the thought that he stayed to protect his sister, and it sounds like he himself is quite impressed by it. Says he has a plan, but first he has to run everything by someone else, which as it turned out is actually his younger sister. Sold is noticeably confused. The sister is involved here too, and Tilty seems stuck on the word discuss, pulling it further let's. Asks if they are okay with this. Sold says, yes, but doesn't understand why the call isn't made by the head of the household. Like tells both of them to just stay still and relax in the mansion until Saul's father gets back on his feet. And late that night, the sound of boots hits the floor as if someone already definitely knows where they need to go. He enters the bedroom and calls a girl named Celuria. She is sitting on the bed covered with plush animals and, without looking up from the book, Celuria asked her brother if he found the girl he is hunting. Like gives her an indulgent smile and says yes, confirming he has securely locked her down as she promised. He adds that her strange clairvoyant power worked 100% and caught her right at the place where Celuria predicted it. Celuria quietly sits on the bed and in her hands, it seems, is the key to the future of the Hartman family. She says finding this inclined one is good news, but immediately adds that there is something else he needs to know. He explains there is a noble boy from Tilty who essentially offers to work for their family and, because of this, it involuntarily hurts to wonder, did Celuria see him in her visions as well? And she replies that she has no idea who this boy is. Breaking through deeper with clairvoyance, Celuria understands. In the future she sees there is not even a soul of the boyish type. Like hears this as a red flag and says he will simply refuse the child. But just. While the moon hangs over the estate, Celuria asks her brother to wait a moment because she definitely feels there is something strange about that child. Celuria explains that Sold is the first person she has ever met whose powers suddenly are completely powerless against her. And she is convinced there must be some great reason why he appeared in their home out of nowhere. Saul stands still and smiles, wondering if he really is special as Celuria thinks. And Celuria still closely watches him, trying to understand, success for her family or complete ruin. She decides will judge him herself meanwhile. Out of nowhere, a dark crack begins to tear in the air. It turns out it was too early to celebrate because this creepy dark hole just stands in the forest and emits such a terrible atmosphere. Returning home, Saul settles into a new life, becoming a guard apprentice for the Hartman family. And he is beaming with joy. Tilty officially moves into the mansion and will live with them from now on. He says that his dad was definitely confused by all this fuss, but still gave them his blessing to stay. Garland stands with crossed arms and tells the boy that he will explain everything to his mother himself. Soul only thanks him for the support and for the fact that they both hold on to each other. Garland explains, for such noble provincials as they are, finding an inn with high-ranking families is a real gift, but that's not all. He tells Cell that this is a huge opportunity both for him and for Cell, but the child is left to guess what other opportunity her father is talking about. Sold suggests an idea, to find the magic stone, and just the mention of it completely confuses Garland. It turns out such things are not traded openly at all, but if they are now connected to the Marquis house, this might be their only real chance to get one of them. Sold nods in agreement and the clicking of thoughts in his head immediately rolls out. He knows, if they manage to get the magic stone, finally they can order a proper sword for the fray. A blade is needed specifically for Majin's fencing technique, one strong enough to truly withstand the power of this level. Because if that seller can pull this off, he definitely knows he will become much stronger than he is now. Garland Bow relentlessly moves forward preparing to leave, and tells Lord Rake that he is leaving 2 children in his care. Rake asks Garland not to worry and wishes him a safe journey back, while the children on the sidewalk wave goodbye to him as he leaves. He was sold with the main mission in focus to be Tilty's personal bodyguard. He knows as long as Walga is still targeting her, she won't truly go outside, but in every other way she is almost free to do whatever she wants. Life in the estate has indeed been smooth lately. Every time they are served wonderful dishes, every day without exception. Even the time they spend hitting these books in the library brings no anxiety. Tilty finally has time for entertainment, chasing dogs outside while Sold keeps watch. He realizes Sedulus understands that an entire week has actually passed without any serious problems. But then, he notices how Celuria hides behind the walls and watches them intently as if she has been spying for several days. He keeps her under close watch for a whole week and begins to better understand who she really is. It turns out she is Celuria Hartman, a sister character from that game a Mounto-like that he remembers. Seeing her just standing still, Sed starts to doubt. Isn't it time for him to finally approach and talk to her? But Tilty beats him to it, shouting as soon as she notices Celuria peeking from around the corner. Tilty looks her straight in the eye and simply asks why she is constantly watching her from the shadows. Celuria just stands still with a completely blank expression, looking directly at Tilty as if looking through her. Suddenly, a strange spiral pattern flashes in Celuria's eyes, and she reacts as if she has just realized something colossal. Out of nowhere, Celuria lunges forward and grabs Tilty, wrapping her arms around her, while Soul, standing behind, is left completely bewildered. Celuria tells Tilty that she needs to come to her room immediately, and Tilty is so confused that she can't even understand what is going on. Celuria says they need to talk and pulls Tilty away, while Soul tries to intervene and asks what is happening. They step inside and tell Soul that there is no need to worry about them, so Soul shifts attention to him. Like apologizes for how selfishly his sister behaves and asks Soul to just tolerate her a little. He explains that as soon as Celuria becomes like this, she can no longer be stopped. And because of this, Soul begins to wonder what exactly he means by that. Outside the estate, everything looks quite calm. Dogs run on the grass as usual. While they sit down for tea, Like begins to tell about the power Celuria possesses, and that it is essentially a blessing for the entire Hartman family. He marvels at this blessing, which had already been mentioned, and explains. The power of Celuria saved him so many times that he even had to ask her permission before hiring Sold. Like Call's sister is a guiding star for their entire family, and at that moment it clicks for Sold. He remembers who Celuria is from the game. He pulls from memory how she behaved as a guide every time he got stuck, and playing with the memory draws back an old legend about winds that carve a path through the unknown. Sold tries to piece everything together and keeps the main point in mind. Her specific ability is supposed to show people the exact path they need to take. Because it is a rare gift essentially, it gives her the power to see the future. Sold finally realizes she really is like a sister, so he starts asking about details. But she abruptly cuts off the conversation, apologizes and insists that her power is a complete family secret. She only repeats, her power is special. And by this, she confirms his suspicion she definitely has that clairvoyance he remembers from the game. Sold is left wondering what exactly she is seeing with her own eyes right now. Nearby stands a tray with cupcakes and sandwiches as if just for a snack, and around it rises a pile of plush toys. And the girls are just hanging out in a room full of plush toys, while Celuria and Tilty have arranged their own private tea party away from the boys. Tilty looks a bit uncertain as they spend time together, and she cautiously asks Celuria a question. And Celuria just stares blankly and responds with the same empty look, ordering Tilty to drop all the formality because these addresses and titles are a complete pain. Tilty asks why she was even brought into this room. Celuria simply says she saw them two talking, so she decided to bring her here. Celuria adds that she always acts as she sees fit, because it is never a mistake, and Tilty again freezes in confusion, not understanding what to see means. While Celuria explains that everything she does is for her brother-like one, a sharp, tense look flashes in her eyes. They both just sit among all those soft toys, sharing a quiet moment with each other just like that without hurry. Celuria asks if Tilty is on her side, and Tilty freezes in thought. Does she mean that now they are officially friends? Celuria bursts out with a truly huge smile and begins to say how much she really loves her older brother, that she makes Tilty look as if she turned away, quietly admitting that the love for a dear brother's soul in her is just as strong. She sighs a little sadly as she says, all she really does is just cause him a bunch of problems. Tilty catches her gaze and says she wants to help and her older brother too, just like Celuria helps hers. When Celuria simply looks back, her eyes finally clear up and gather together as if never before. Celuria whispers that everything is fine. As long as she has the desire, she will be able to arrange it. Tilty from these words only thinks more deeply. Maybe the matter is not in the decision, but in her own feelings. Tilty suddenly realized she had once wished for the same thing, and at that very moment her magic finally awakened. She was exactly craving the power to save her brother while these two girls sat nearby. Celuria begins to remember how in childhood she was constantly distracted and lost in thought, and her older brother was nearby, just nearby, without unnecessary words. Because their parents were always busy, and it was he who took care of her, treated her with such warmth that it warmed even in the hardest moments. And even when their parents died in a terrible accident, he held her tightly to himself and promised he would protect her and their home under any circumstances. Celuria was glad he was near, but in her heart there still pulsed a stubborn need to find a way to help him too. And then, in the second she made her wish, and her special power finally awakened. These strange visions suddenly began to emerge in her head out of nowhere again and again. Just remember. These were random fragments of what was supposed to happen in the future, in particular events related to the Hartman family. And one of those visions saved them when a huge rock collapsed right where they were standing. It turned out that all these flashes of the future were the sole reason why her brother remained safe. And Celuria honestly admits she has not the slightest idea when her clairvoyance will work and what exactly it will show her. The only thing she was unwavering about, every person and every event she would see would ultimately in the end work to her brother's benefit. That is why she then took up the task, sitting in her room cluttered with soft toys. He said I should head into the forest south of Gust and save the girl from the guy with the mohawk. He immediately recognized the name Dagura and assured her he would manage. In the vision, she only saw that little girl and the man with the mohawk. And when the moment really came, Sold suddenly appeared nearby, and that turned everything upside down. Celuria sprawls in her room among the toys and tells Tilty how she manages to see the shape of the soul. But Tilty just glances sideways and cuts in, saying that only she can truly decide such things for her brother. Like stands aside and looks at the lights, trying to guess whether these new people are really friends or another batch of enemies they need to be dealt with. The next day, the sun rises over the Hartman estate. While N continues walking and Tilticrea winds through the corridors, Tilty recalls. She still hasn't seen Celuria. She looked completely confused. Celuria said that she was generally unable to see sold things on her own. She stopped to think about how her magic works specifically foresight and what exactly is breaking in it. Finally, it dawns on him. For some reason, Celuria really cannot see what awaits him ahead. Before he could comprehend this, the guard already starts shouting after the princess and both children flinch. Sold asks what all the fuss is about, and the guard panics and shouts that Lady Celuria has completely disappeared. One of the senior guards looks quite alarmed. He says that every vassal is now searching for the princess somewhere. Tiltic calls his brother while the seller steps forward and promises. Together they will also help with the search. Within the estate, the guards are bustling everywhere and shouting, and the search for Celuria becomes more and more tense with each minute. And high above, on the very edge of the roof, Celuria stands all alone and thinks about what the future she sees was like. She always led her on the right path even when, before what awaited next, Celuria looked too frightened. She moves the toe of her boot closer to the edge, and is certain that this very moment was destined for her to see. Standing at the highest point of the estate, she gazes above the clouds as the wind picks up. She suddenly jumps right from the edge, her hand outstretched, and she whispers to herself that she will do everything she is capable of. When she falls, she simply closes her eyes and lets everything happen, looking as if this stop actually brings her peace until Soul appears on the roof out of nowhere and grabs her hand, stopping the fall before everything gets really bad. Soul shouts Celuria's name, grabs her, and trembles with panic, begging, "What is she doing?" Celuria again just looked at him with that empty, confused gaze. She doesn't understand why he is even here. She begins to think about that vision where she falls through the sky completely alone, because in that future she saw, there was nowhere anyone who could help her. She tells him that she was simply following her vision, which Listia leaves him completely confused. She insists that in every version of the future she has ever seen, the only chance to truly save her brother is to jump. Sold is completely stunned, barely able to. While he hangs below to say this word like on watch, or when you are about to lose him he screams as if he sold out just so it would be seen. Because he is still hanging over the abyss. The seller Sold clicked the safety in her hands and said, if something happens to her, he will simply fall into despair. They stand there together on the roof. The seller looks angry and Celuria just stares into the distance. And she also twists something, insists that everything she has to do is only for the sake of the right future to come. Standing on the high roof, Sold shouts at the top of her voice and demands to explain what exactly she means by the right future. He does not stop again, and again he asks if she really believes that all this is for the sake of some doomed path. Let her just sit it out while the people he loves fall into despair or go to some tragic end. Celuria does not say a word. She just stands and tears flow endlessly down her face like. Sold shouts that she will accept nothing like that and she does not care what it is. He squeezes her hand tightly and says, the future is not predetermined, it is a thing you build yourself right now at this moment. Celuria's eyes widen sharply. He looks completely stunned by his words because, in the end, everything falls into place for Saul, and he finally understands why she could never see his future in her visions. It is because he is a reborn one and does not belong to the original scenario of this world. And although the original ranger was destined to die in the game, he now stands right here alive and well. The old man sits on the edge of the roof and shouts that he will make his own future and understands this. He no longer has a clearly written scenario. And finally he notices them. He shouts, calls Celuria, and she turns around and answers her older brother. He rushes forward and pulls her into a tight embrace, exhaling with relief. She is alive and safe. Lowers his gaze and calls her a fool for such recklessness, but it is clear that he is just worried about her. Celuria is silent, pressing into the embrace, and tears are still rolling down her face. She finally finds her voice and, addressing her brother, says she is sorry for everything that happened. Shifts his gaze to the boy and says to Saul that he sincerely thanks him. He admits, in fact, he heard the entire conversation he previously had with Celuria. Agrees and says that the future is what they must create for themselves right now. Here and now he takes a risky big step. He offers paid and official places for the Hartman family no longer as an ordinary student. Sold raises his gaze, on his face pure admiration as he rushes forward. He extends his hand to shake Leica, says that from now on he should be called simply Reich and happily agrees. Celuria watches as they grow closer. Casts a look at Sold, full of sincere respect, and says, he is the savior of his sister and their entire home. Sold just stands still with a proud smile and soaks in this moment until one of the knights rushes in running and shouts, calling the young master. Stops him, calm down, Celuria is safe, and he finally exhales she is whole and everything is fine with her. But the night is not over yet, he says. There is another trouble. They report that a rift suddenly appeared in the southern forest. And and Solden both are struck as if by a wedge. and he shouts hoarsely, completely stunned by this news. The mood changes instantly as soon as the light takes on that piercing look, and a voice solemnly proclaims, "The day has finally come." Solden panics and clarifies if it is really a rift, while he himself thinks that the event matches word for word what happened in the game. Like only confirms, things have gotten really bad, they just opened a portal to the demon world. The night rages about the outbreak starting from the magical dimension and the sky literally splits open. A rift that. Solden understands this instantly freezes, looking at the crack in the sky and realizes, this is exactly the huge chance he needs. Finally makes his move. He remembers how Frey said, the magical dimension is a world of beasts and pure energy, which is the only place where magical ore can grow strong enough to withstand any spell. These are the magical stones that Solden is after that because he knows he needs to get his hands on a magical stone sword if he wants to have the power that truly matters. For him, the sword is the only way to protect the people he loves. And he is ready to do anything to secure a better future for Tilty. Looking back at the rift at that very moment, a huge entrance to the magical dimension stands there like a wound in the world. In fact, it is simply a completely different dimension. It is filled with mana, the source of all magical power that creates a completely unique and deadly dangerous ecosystem that does not follow any of the rules of the human world. In this world, all the crazy beasts and plants are fully nourished by mana. And it turns out, a moderate amount of mana simply turns into magical power. In usual doses, it does not even have any effect on people. But as soon as the mana levels exceed what the body can endure, everything starts to flip. Heavy dizziness strikes, nausea approaches, and that's just the beginning. And then it only gets worse. In the absolute worst case, it can end in death that much mana can actually kill. As the reports say, the mana concentration inside this particular magical dimension is right at the ceiling. To prevent anyone from getting mana poisoning, he decides, only he and the elite with high mana capacity will set out on the journey. Like returns to his team and asks Zweig and Audrey if they are ready to move, and they shout back that they are in place, while Diviaka gives him a broad smile showing, everything is under control and the young lord can count on it. Audrey stands up straight respectfully and declares that his whole life belongs to House Hartman. Finally, like Tella's eyes, he leaves the estate holding everything in his hands, and the commander tells him, fear nothing. Sold runs through the statistics for this area with his eyes, comparing levels of magical power and checking magical concentration. It's exactly like in a game. To simply enter the dungeon, a level 20 requirement is needed, and with such concentration, anyone with a term of only 2 weeks won't even be able to enter. So Sold finally realizes how crucially high the concentration really is. The thought begins to gnaw at him, won't this location become insanely dangerous? Then Will puts him in his place and says that he can't take a child into the magical dimension just like that. Seld causes an explosion thinking he's being left behind. He kind of pauses and says, this is just what he usually says to the child, and Dusha stands nearby, completely confused so there. He glances at the team and declares that Sold is definitely not like other children, so he looks for backup from those nearby. Zweig instantly jumps into the conversation and reminds everyone how that guy knocked down Dagura with one blow. Audrey nods and says that ice fencing can deliver a colossal amount of power. Inni stands up and says, even if the boy himself can't use magic, that magical sword will still become a colossal trump card for the team. Like admits, it's still very hard to comprehend, but he can't ignore the fact his 3 best elites stand nearby and all vouch for him as one. He looks straight into the eyes and says that this is a dangerous place but still asks, will he lend them his power? Sold was giving his all and shouting yes, non-stop agreeing to help with the dungeon raid. He thinks if he manages to drag some magical stone there and hit with it, then finally he will gather with a sword that will not break when he uses all his power. But before setting off, he looks back at Tilty and calls her by name a little anxiously, as if he cares about leaving her. She simply turns to him and looks, and on her face is a calm, gentle smile. Tilty tells him not to worry about her while he is away, and these words completely confuse him. She says that Saluria and all the others will be there to protect her, and Saluria at that moment simply makes a peace sign. Sold presses Tilty in his arms, swearing that he definitely will not lose because he has a promise to fulfill. While the whole team watches, Tilty tells him that during his absence she will manage on her own and become stronger. And the two just stand for a moment smiling and trusting each other. Finally Tilty, Saluria and all as one wave to the group, seeing them off as they head towards the magical dimension. The crew is fired up and already ready to move. Sold and Nachai set off to battle. A horse-drawn carriage leaves the city of Gust behind and heads towards the southern forest. The group goes deeper and deeper into the dense, overgrown thicket, where the path becomes worse and sometimes completely broken. As they make their way forward, Sold looks back and asks, does this happen often? But Sold honestly admits this is the first time for him too. He explains, the demonic dimension essentially is just a random catastrophe. Then he insists, These rifts open completely by chance and then only grow further step by step without stopping. And as soon as the holes fully gape open, all kinds of terrible magical creatures immediately start crawling out of them. If they just leave everything as it is, the whole area will be destroyed and everyone living there will suffer. So they have only one option left, to close the rift before everything gets much worse. As he says, this particular crack appeared right in the middle of his family's territory. Like on the Run continues to explain, if this hole really ruins everything in reality, his family will bear the responsibility for it. Since the opposition will not let this slide, Cell asks if he means Walter de Vihib. Like confirms, Walter will definitely try to undermine the name Hartman because he brought danger to the city, mainly so that he could claim that they are no longer capable of governing the city of Gust. As they pass by the waterfall, as is customary, they recall, let these demonic dimensions be a complete hassle, but they do have one advantage. And that is their crazy stockpile of rare resources, what they find inside. He talks about special plants, monster materials, and ores that no one has managed to obtain in the human world. So profitable that some nobles even pray for these reefs to open just to get rich. He also adds, all this money is not the main thing if you are not strong enough to really clear the place. As soon as a few guards notice them, they start shouting that they have been waiting just like before and lead them forward. The group finally reaches a huge rift, a jagged hole hangs in the air, clearly marking the entrance to the demonic dimension. Soul begins to look around and suddenly catches a strange premonition. First, he asks if this place is really what he thinks it is. One of the knights replies, he hit the mark right on point. Right here where Sold fought and beat Dog stood not so long ago. The energy around the rift presses like a giant mouth, ominously gaping to swallow them all together. Sold cannot shake the feeling that something is wrong here. Is it really a coincidence that the rift opened exactly here? And then he raises the testimony. They were indeed reported that the dock or its frozen body disappeared from this place. Mobrib confirms this and adds, by the time any soldiers arrived here to check, the body had already been taken instead. This crazy rift was raging here. Zweig tries to keep his voice steady. He says there is no need to worry because Dogra is definitely dead, and then asks Saul to back her up. The soldier notes, everyone saw how it happened, but just as certainly that Walter probably sent someone to take the body to cover up the traces. While the mystery hangs over them, everyone gets to work and Lice, having the floor, gives the order. The team is finally to enter inside. Shouts finally time to tear apart the demon network, and the whole team together bursts out a loud, joyful cheer as they tear into the pit. Returning to the mansion, Siluria asks Tilty about that dark power she spoke of, and Tilty says, back then, since childhood, her magic rebelled every time she began to feel oppressed. Her mother called it the power of darkness. Frankly, it sounds very scary because Tilty admits she cannot control it and usually just loses consciousness as soon as it starts. He'll take it, she looks away and says she is convinced this strange power of hers only brings misfortune to. Every time she really has nothing to do with it, Siluria just hangs around for a moment and tells her. The potential itself is not that bad. The problem is only with people. They are the ones who decide what to use it for. And she understands it because once long ago her clairvoyance also frightened her, it turns out. Like was the one who gave her this advice when she was still little, helping her cope with being different, and he was also the chief. She concludes with the words, any power can become evil if you are an idiot, but if you act correctly it can really bring happiness to people. Siluria finishes her advice and tells Tilty that the proper use of her power is exactly what brings happiness. Untilty takes it to heart, asks if it really works that way, then suddenly smiles and exclaims that she finally understands everything. She barely squints, winks, and thanks Siluria, promising that from now on she will no longer let her powers scare her. In order to please everyone with her dark magic, she announces, special training starts right now. And then a fight, some strange battle cry about needing to be happy breaks into the air while the team fights off plant monsters. Soul jumped right into the thick of the clash, shouting a sharp cry as if he swings his blade in a huge arc and covers every monster in his path with it. The creatures don't even have a chance. They scream as the force of his strike tears them apart. Like retreated and just watched everything thinking, Sold's skills are a whole different level. And he thinks, since Sold cannot use magic, it means he had to put every drop of strength into the sword to become a master. Like kept looking and looking at him, and then wondered how much time that man must have spent just training the blade to reach such a level. But a moment is interrupted by a winged monster. It falls from the sky with a loud scream and completely confuses everyone, as if no one expected anything like this. Zweig, without wasting a second, rushes into battle, shouts his aqua lance and releases a huge water explosion. She closely stares down the monster, it screeches and flies back under the blows, and Zweig advances further and covers the attack, as if that is how it should be. She shouts at Audrey across the entire space to come to help, and Audrey lets out a battle cry ready to bring down the hammer. Audrey activates the skill Rock Hammer. With all her might, she strikes the hammer on the ground and giant torn stone spikes grow from the soil. She rushes through the last monsters and finishes them off before they release their last pathetic scream. For a moment, everything quiets down, and the dust and smoke from the magical attacks slowly begin to dissipate. Audrey checks on Like make sure he is okay, and when Like says he is fine, Audrey adds, "Finally it seems clean here." But suddenly Sold begins to groan and grabs his head and immediately realizes something is definitely wrong. Sold's panic suddenly seems to double as he sharply bends in half, and shouting his own name falls to the ground. He is satisfied more comfortably, given some medicine, and he just sits and looks away to the side, a humiliated shadow within himself. Apologizing, saying he is the head of the family, but cannot cope even with a minor magical illness. Sold stands nearby and asks why he even ventured into the demonic dimension, hinting, a leader should not push himself so far. Like lowers his gaze and agrees, yes, that's true, but feels something else. You can't just sit out and give orders, staying safe and protected by others. He directly tells Sold that he never wanted to be such a leader, and Sold looks almost stunned by how much this guy carries on himself, especially considering that, supposedly, he grew up watching his father always become first in line, leading his people forward with a weapon in hand. Not only people from Hartman House loved him, the whole city gathered together to catch even a glimpse and raise his name in a loud greeting. Everyone wanted to be near how boldly his father behaved. People followed him through anything, shouting for the family to live long. Like admits with a sad smile, he admired this man more than anything, and his only true goal was to grow up and become exactly like him. He worked hard to grow into such leadership, but everything turned upside down when his parents suddenly died in an accident and he had to carry the weight of the family name himself. Like says that he eventually took on the role of head of the family when he was still a very small boy. And all this time he tried hard to keep a brutal front. But as soon as he confronts the truth with his gaze, he immediately realizes he was just faking it because everyone else covered for him. Even the servants in the mansion had to support him, and he admits it was not only with them, he was also saved by his own younger sister, Celuria. Now he finally realized he was always stuck at the end of the line while everyone else stood ahead to protect him. He clenches his fists to the limit from complete helplessness, drags the words to Sold, and confesses how miserable he felt and that he cannot forgive himself for who he was. Like sits on his gear, holding his head in his hands completely broken. Nearby, Soul just stands silently watching him. Soul says that despite his stubbornness, he actually made it all the way to the demon dimension but still became useless because of this magical disease. And now he is beginning to believe he will never become as strong as his father. And Soul abruptly interrupts and replies that this is not true. He glances aside, shocked to hear how he suddenly joins the conversation. Soul lowers his voice and tells him directly, everyone is weak, especially someone like himself, who cannot even deliver a single magic strike. He lowers his gaze, admitting, he often feels like a worthless character without a true purpose, except the role of someone who needs to be protected. Soul says that he should believe that change is possible and shouts for him to master the sword. And it all comes down to the heart that believes, just like when Soul's father once watched him train in the rain. He sells grips with his blade with a confident look, knowing this very thought keeps him afloat. Nearby, Celuria keeps her eyes closed in prayer, while Tilty stands right behind her watching the moment unfold. Like thinks over the word believe, then tells Soul that he finally gets what he meant. Solid explains, true strength grows from a person's desire and only works when you truly believe in it. So, thank you for the advice, he says. It seems I will try, and it seems I am already on the path to starting to believe in it. Even someone like him has a chance to become strong. He wants to be someone people are proud of like his father. At this thought, a wide smile blooms on Saul's face. At that very moment, Swag and Audrey burst back into the group with a bang, calling them, and as soon as they manage, they directly ask how everything went on their side. Swag says it as if there is a straight road from here, and it sounds quite confident. So, Audrey adds that this magical plane has a rather simple scheme compared to those they had to see. Like begins to explain to Sold, these dungeon dimensions are essentially just distortions from another world. And usually everything looks like tiny, strangely curved gardens, and every time one appears, it is always different. Ainz points to an uneven area ahead and says, further inside, there is a huge dome there, presumably sits the core. But he sells the wonder and insists that even the base, the core, is the heart of all magic, and says, the heart is the entire dimension of magic. He explains the entire space is made of condensed magical energy, and all this power is born precisely from the core. The appearance of the core changes depending on the location. Sometimes it looks like a plant, and sometimes like a magical stone. And it can even pop out like a magical creature, a monster with a core inside. Like concludes the lesson with the words, if you destroy the core, the rift to this world will finally close. Ainz tries to keep everything light, says that these simple shells usually aren't such big problems. Light urges the group to move, and Sold simply picks up the pace. And let him keep everything serious. Tell the team not to lose vigilance for a second, especially emphasize to Sold to stay sharp. Sold gets a bad feeling. In the games he played, a high concentration of magic always meant trouble, and the level on this core was way too high. Everything around is complete chaos, spirals of white glow and torn edges as they delve into the distortion, reaching a massive open area where the group looks like tiny dots against the backdrop of giant rift walls. Audrey looks around the empty space and says she doesn't see anything that could resemble a core. Like nods and replies that there are no signs of a magical beast nearby, while Seld meanwhile begins to feel something here doesn't add up. His eyes widen sharply as soon as he realizes where the danger is coming from, the other side. He shouts to everyone to look up. The entire squad freezes in place and, raising their eyes, freezes again now in complete shock as a giant shadow begins to descend on them. Zwei can't even put a word together while Einstein is next shouting that this is definitely some kind of prank, because the size of the thing flying straight at them is incredible. He hits the ground with a look of complete horror and barely manages to say that the creature before them is so gigantic that its silhouette engulfs the entire field, and the knights next to its massive wings and tail look like beetles. This is a three-eyed black dragon. It roars so loudly that the whole space trembles. Zweig recognizes this is the legendary dragon from the tales. Ainz shouts they are dealing with a real black dragon. Like starts spiraling down, sweating profusely, and asks how he is supposed to take down the core, which is actually a giant monster. Thanks a lot. He steps forward with his sword ready and aloud as if it's enough just to believe in himself. The boy is completely focused, repeating that even if the enemy tries to divide them, they will still win. His voice echoes in the cave and he addresses the whole group. They will not lose this fight. Sold lowers his blade to the right level and locks into a perfect stance, as if ready for any turn. And Zweig says the boy is right and Einstein supports him. If the dragon is the core, then all they have left is to make it happen. The black dragon holds its position and growls so that the grotto shakes in rhythm. Someone tries to make her wait, but it is clear she does not intend to speak. It widely opens its maw and covers the entire place with a wave of dark flames, a continuous stream. They sold themselves together into the nightstand against the heat. Now they are stuck fast while the fire approaches. So, Uvid screamed, "Waterwall," and a moment later a powerful splash of magic struck the fire, closing the explosion. A shout flies out. Sold yells at Zweig. He is now holding the shield and cannot believe how truly powerful this flame is. Zweig understands that her magic is reaching its limit and whispers to the boy, "She won't last much longer." So, every time the dragon turns for another strike, a shout rises like an echo, "Everyone back." His soul stubbornly freezes irritably. He has finally stopped waiting and is preparing to make his move. He lets out a sharp scream, and the whole room explodes. Fire and magic scatter in chaos. The dragon raises its gaze in complete shock as a huge blow crashes down on it. It did not anticipate this. And another beep sounded. Dazzling light floods everything. The strike hits the beast right in the head. Sold finally sees clearly this is no longer just about the rear. He has finally understood the real trick with power, so we shout that he does it to protect his friends, and in an instant, like a flash, he releases the water wolf technique. The knights are already losing their minds over his magical ice sword, and I can't believe this boy froze the entire dragon. The monster is frozen like a statue in a thick layer of ice, completely shut down, at least for now. They just stand and watch, and it seems it's all sold. They replay in their heads how the power of this child is truly insane. He begins to get stuck in his thoughts, admits that he was so scared that his body simply didn't move. Lick clenches his fist until it trembles, and he feels disgusted realizing that he alone froze in place. But Sold shouts that they are not finished yet, and does not lower his guard while preparing for the next round. Sold stares at the giant frozen shiny block and asks if the black dragon is still alive, and at that very moment, the monster shatters the ice into a million shards. It rises tall and unshaken and roars so loudly that everything around trembles. While this roar cuts through the air, the dragon wakes up again and shows one row of sharp teeth after another. The dragon squints, stares intently at him, shakes its head, and finally the remaining shards of ice fall away. Seeing the beast ready to strike, one of the night bells calls to the stone wall. A giant stone barrier thunders into place, restraining. A shadow briefly covers the group. Audrey says they can temporarily disappear from sight, and he, without any doubt, insists they have no chance of winning. Soul does not give up and immediately pushes them. They just need to find the dragon's weak spot. This phrase seems to confuse them. Soul confidently picks up, saying he knows what he's talking about, recalling how this monster was a complete nightmare in the game world. And yet there is one specific place they should focus on, precisely in the reverse scale. He explains, even weak hits, even if they only scratch, will not leave a mark on its armor. That's why they couldn't take it down before. Sold recalls they need to hit the reverse scale on the dragon's throat. That's the key. Only then can they deal enough damage to actually take it down, and he immediately understands what that means. Panic washes over. How the hell did they let them get so close? Crawling through those huge flames, a complete nightmare. The group stays low, pressed against the rocks while Ainz reworks this to Sold and asks if they can really rely on him for this. Audrey reminds he needs to land one perfect heavy hit. That's how they hit the weak spot. Zweig promises they will give him all the support they can, and Audrey says the knights will act as live bait. Sold can get the start he needs. He agrees with the plan but still glances at his own weapon and raises the main problem. His sword might not hold up. Zweig gives him his replacement, but the blade breaks every time he goes for a high-level move Sold knows. They have only one shot for this. He says he will shoot with purpose, but just as he is about to start, sharply orders them to wait. Everyone freezes and shifts their gaze to him. He stands in the middle of the cave and the dragon still looms nearby. And he looks her straight in the eyes with a serious face. He says he also wants to help in the fight. The knights are completely exhausted, request they shout in complete shock. They try to stop him, insisting that there is no question of him going into such danger alone, especially since Audrey fears what might happen if the young master is wounded, says plainly. If something happens to him, it will be the end of everything. And he simply clenches his fist until it hurts, trembling slightly as he says he knows exactly what the stakes are here. He understands the danger but cannot stand aside while everyone is fighting. When Sold stubbornly breaks the tension, he directly says that he believes in him. They just go for it and fight the dragon together like a team. The knights watch over his soul, hold their position, and it seems like she finally blooms with a confident Smiliasili nods and agrees with the plan. Her laughter is immediately echoed in responding. Both are already ready to give their all. Such a spectacle at night resonates deeply in the heart when the young lord steps forward like that. They cannot help but feel a drop of Pridivan despite everything else. One of the veteran knights only mutters quietly enough to hide what is really on his mind. He sticks to the mission, but everything erupts in an instant. Someone shouts for them to watch their feet, and Audrey suddenly pushes Sold and sharply to the side. Because the dragon swoops down, its giant jaws twitch, and it grabs everyone. When they realized they were being watched, he replied, "Finally, I have found you." And the knights' frantic rush immediately took position. One of them shouted Aqua Chain Spell, and water burst into the air in a whirl, swirling all around, everywhere at once. Then he finished with Rock Lock, and huge chunks of stone burst from the ground, scattering in all directions. And the water tightly wrapped chains around the dragon's head, preventing its jaws from opening. While heavy rock slammed down on its claws, pressing so it wouldn't move an inch. The dragon roars muffled, and the knight holds the monster in place with all his strength, firmly pressing it to the ground. Then he looks around and orders Soul to make a move immediately. Because he is struggling to keep the dragon pinned, and says that this magic won't hold it for long. Sold responds with a shout, saying he's already in action, tightly gripping his sword and stepping forward. And he rushes toward the beast, knowing exactly where to strike the reverse scale. Sold finally notices the glowing reverse scale on the dragon's neck. And he rushes forward, straining his throat with a scream that she is right there, and with one single strike lays everything down without exception. The dragon twitches and sharply shudders from the blow, but instead of falling, it bursts into the sky and explodes, scattering a massive shockwave, a tremor. Earth and stones fly everywhere. The knights are caught off guard. One of them barely manages to comprehend how swiftly it rushed by. And another soldier immediately panics. His target slips from under his sight and disappears into the sky. Lake raises a shout to everyone, "Careful," and himself, growling under his breath, instantly realizes they have lost the advantage. From above, the dragon emits a low growl, casts a glance down at the knights who are just standing, and they swear. One of the men quietly admits, now that the beast is out of reach, he feels completely useless. The dragon responds with a cold look, freezes only for a moment, just enough to wait for the right moment to finish them off. Lake grits his teeth. He feels completely helpless, unable to do anything to stop the beast, and at this very moment begins to blame himself. His eyes widen sharply. He catches a second, and something invisible and unshakable suddenly stops him in place. He sees that soldier standing there all alone and loses control. Shouts at the guy not to waste a second, to get out of there and run, saving his life, and Soul doesn't even flinch, just stands still, with the same calm face, and looks back as if everything is under control. The boy says that he truly believes in him, and that should be the last thing Lake manages to hear. He just stepped back one step, completely stunned, and the silence pressed on his ears. Meanwhile, the dragon hovered right above them, opening its huge jaws, and bright light began to gather in its throat. It burst out with a huge splash of energy, hitting the ground with such force that it swept away everything in sight. Giant clouds of dust and smoke rose in an explosion. The ground disappeared from view, while the dragon watched the aftermath from above. The beast slowly lowered its gaze through the haze, clicked its teeth, and froze, waiting to see if anyone survived that blow. The soul breaks away from the sky, crashes into the air like a meteor, and directs its blade straight at the dragon. He looks at everything with his heart and throat, shouting across the entire square that he is counting on the child for her to stop this. They move together in one last rush. The pressure builds, and the ball lines aim the sight and urge the shot. He replies that everything is already in progress, his face as proof he will not retreat for a moment. He swings with everything he has and releases a giant strike one that cuts the beast right through. The dragon doesn't even have time to recover. The striking force completely destroys it. The massive creature finally crashes to the ground. Dust and smoke rise up as soon as the clash ends. The nearby knights lose their composure, shouting that they indeed won, and that the team play was simply on another level. Sol just laughs a little, saying the victory belongs to him because he was the one holding everything together. Isn't that so? To tell the child that she is the real reason why they all are still standing on their feet. Like Stance, they look down, silently admitting that he tried to be brave, but his legs simply froze before that dragon. The way Salai rushes into battle without any doubt instantly gave him the courage he lacked. He tells the boy, seeing him standing without fear before such a monster was exactly what was needed. So he thanks the hero he always looked up to, and that one just blushes from all the praise. The knights laugh and brush it off. A broken sword, they say, a small price for killing a dragon, and even offer their own blade because the beast is indeed finally defeated, so they head away. He slowed down and, looking back over his shoulder, felt a chill run down his spine. And he is right, the dragon's eyes burst open and it looks again. Dark energy pulses through the scales, so now it looks much worse than before. He loses control, yet it still moves. Could it still be reaching out if he hit exactly its weak spot? Sold realizes he completely underestimated Black Dragon. He knows this is the worst possible option, so how? When the flames close around, thoughts run through his head one after another, like a million different ones. Like everyone else, he can only watch and scream. But he doesn't even have time to think. The body moves on its own and at this very moment. But the dragon unleashes a terrible fiery blast, one that should have wiped everyone out on the spot. Ini grabs him to pull him down while Audrey watches as the flames engulf them, but somehow, like shouts that he should be handed over to the soldiers, and thinks the child could not have survived a direct hit of such force. From the height of the dragon's breath, it looks as if it swallows the entire territory, and a small bubble stubbornly holds on. And even the dragon itself looks confused when the fire begins to swirl and pull away from the target, leaving. The knight freezes in shock. Audrey asks what is even happening and, like, notices, the fire behaves as if it is simply being pulled. Just at one point, warmth and energy converge on it, as if it were a human vacuum. As if steps grow right in the center of the explosion, he does not believe his own eyes and screams because Sold stands right in the middle of the heat. He instantly understands everything. Everything is like during his clash with Fenrir. The dragon definitely draws demonic power, so Sold grips the sword tightly. At this very moment, an idea for a completely new technique ignites, and begins to laugh wildly, declaring that this is the best feeling in the world, while dark energy swirls around his body. Sir Mileskill shouts his name and the knights simply freeze, pure shock. Adri Ketch cannot even gather his thoughts and asks if this boy really absorbed all that flame. And as soon as the weapon appeared, he literally reforged the fire into a new blade. No, he really thanked the Black Dragon and told the beast, because of this attack he already managed to evolve and become even stronger. With these marks on his face, he looks like a completely different person standing there and grinning in a wide smile. The dragon roars in complete despair, while Dusha remains calm. He is already ready. Like, and his knights are completely stunned by what they see. They wonder, some crazy power, no matter how much it was hidden, because no one should be able to turn a dragon's breath into such a sword. Sol just throws a calm glance. He is already fully composed, ready to show everyone what his demonic god-demon style is really capable of. Sold stands still with dark spots on his face and feels the power unfolding within him. He says that he is finally beginning to understand how to activate this new ability. He explains that first you need to take a specific stance and then meet the enemy's attack head-on. But as soon as he thinks about it, he understands one support is not enough for this to work. There is a deeper mental side here. Since he knows he must have Endurancido protect himself, and everyone he cares about holds his position, as well as the dragon releases another huge burst of energy aiming directly at him. The entire area explodes with a huge blast, spreading a dazzling flash around. It completely throws him off rhythm, and he shouts the name of the soul. He thinks the child has just been vaporized, and the soul still remains at the center of attention. He understands there is even more in this power. He feels how the demonic god style breathes and lives deep inside his own body. He calls this move Ice Wolf Flash. Now the sword not only cuts, it carries a blade of ice that freezes everything it touches. As if the ice itself holds the sword, and its very body is an instinct already hunting for prey. Sold feels a new power awakening within him and thinks that it is exactly what lives inside his sword. As if wolf speed has settled in his body. And his gaze becomes icy and sharp when he prepares to plunge from the Skydo strike. At this moment he clearly understands. Now in his hands is the very blade of the Black Dragon's flame. He lunged forward and shouted, "Luck Dragon, Black Dragon's flame wings." He lets out a furious scream, and his whole body turns into a streak of flame like a dragon. He cuts through the sky at a crazy speed and leaves a trail behind. The dragon sees this but doesn't have time to react, so Sold hoarsely shouts at the beast to eat its own flame. He flies with all his might into the dragon's neck and strikes a deafening blow. A giant pillar of fire suddenly explodes upward, throwing the dragon's head back and completely smashing the place. The knights literally lose control from excitement. They shout and cheer as loudly as they can because the soul blade is completely broken, it snapped near the hilt. In that last strike he put in everything he had. Leaving him standing amid all that smoke screen, he fired full force into his chest and celebrated the great victory. The black dragon, the heart of this entire demonic dimension, finally begins to burn out and vanish into nothingness. And as the dust settles and the whole group remains in place, trying to catch their breath, Sold grimaces at Lake and grins a huge smile, while Lake just freezes completely stunned by the power of this boy. When the dragon disappears, behind remains this huge magical crystal stone glowing brightly right in front of them. Audrey asks why such a giant thing is needed at all and how much it might cost. Ein says it would easily sell for at least $1 billion. He climbed the stairs in giant magic stone and noticed that with such a find, he really can, he already knows. Finally, he will be able to make the sword he has dreamed of for so long. Sold thinks about how Tilty will rejoice at this gift, so he tells her to just wait. For now we are again at Hartman Estate and now the focus is on Tilty, right now. She strains all her strength, barely making a sound of pain as she tries to hold back a giant whirl of dark energy. Celuria encourages her, and Tilty only mutters hoarsely in response. She puts all the power of control she has into it. Celuria says she is almost done, but then, until Tilty finally reaches her limit and catches a breath, helplessly exhaling in waves of her own breath. I see how the dark power she so stubbornly tried to forge cracks and crumbles into a pile of tiny fragments. She falls to her knees, breathes heavily, and hates herself for losing again, so Celuria tries. Make her take a break because she trains forever, but Tilty only raises her eyes and says she will continue because her older brother works hard and she must not fall behind. Celuria tells Tilty that she is too stubborn in training. Tilty just laughs and brushes it off, then apologizes for such stubbornness. But then, the whole house shakes from a colossal explosion. Celuria lets out a scream, the walls tremble and dust falls everywhere. Celuria points to the window and says the noise came from there, so Tilty begins to wonder what is actually happening. In the garden, underground, at the entrance where the gates once stood, a huge cloud of smoke and debris covers the breach. Scattered all over the ground are Hartman's knights, barely able to die with a groan, lying in the mud. Commander Anise stands motionless and with a frozen gaze looks at the smoke in complete shock. This is simply impossible because the man who stood there was supposed to be dead. But it is Dogra and he looks like a complete monster. He walks through fire and his hand burns with heat. On his face is a terrifying smile. He looks around the estate and asks where his target is hiding. Doug will remember someone as a true scoundrel and say that this time he will definitely kill him. He stretches out his burnt hand to snatch another guard and boasts a strange bracelet studded with eyes. Brother Tilty stands in the wasteland, staring at the frozen body of Dagora and pushes it with words. It's time to wake up. He promises to give him a gift or else his face will remain frozen, motionless in the silence on the screen hanging behind the ice. Tilty reaches out his hand, saying he uses the power of darkness to fight darkness. And then, on the wrist, Doggo fastens a terrible bracelet, all covered in dimples of eyes. Dagoa groans, crashing to the ground, and Brother Tilty quickly asks if he has finally returned among the living. He raises his eyes to his savior and Doggo recalls in his thoughts, this is his master, although he was warned that this is his absolute last chance. Brother Tilty, looking coldly, gives the final order, go and kill that boy. Dagura feels the power tearing through him, so he tells his master, no words are needed. He lets out a huge roar and shouts that this time he will definitely finish him, kill him. He stands right in front of the Hartman mansion and shouts for Saldo to come out. He knows the boy is hiding inside. Diaguro raises his hand, dark energy bursts out, and the bracelet with the eyeball on the wrist flashes with pure power. His face twists with rage and he tears the air with a scream. He will blow up everything that stands in his way. The ground begins to crack under pressure. Celuria stares through fear while Tilty shouts at him, stop. Celuria tries to say that her brother is not here, but Tilty steps forward and declares she will not allow anyone to harm Hartman. Dagoa only chuckles with a creepy smile, calls Tilty the priestess of darkness, and hoarsely says that he has long been waiting to see her. He leans closer and mockingly asks, show him your dark power once again. Tilty tells Celuria to stay behind and apologizes, saying she regrets that everything has fallen into such a mess. But the younger girl stops her and orders her not to apologize. Celuria explains, although her sight has failed her, she will still be thrown to the manor as part of someone's doom. Now everything is different. Unexpectedly for Tilty, she acts so seriously, so catching her completely off guard becomes real. Looking straight into her eyes, Celuria promises to protect her because from now on she chooses her own fate. Tilty quietly looks at the young girl and says Celuria's name, noticing how a new determination suddenly arises in the child herself. But Dagora on the other side of the broken ground just bursts out laughing at the very thought that she would protect anyone. The man loses patience and shouts for them to shut up. He sharply waves his hand and disperses the strike. Tilty reacts instantly, calls an air wall, and wraps them both with a swirling shield of wind. But that's not all. She throws a colossal whirlwind of air, and with a crash it slams back into Dagura. The dog twists his face in rage as he growls at the freak so that he dares not underestimate him. He releases a giant burst of energy that instantly scatters everything around, and Saluria lets out a scream. Tilty falls face down into the mud and groans in pain, while Saluria calls her in panic. And Dagura is already there, reaching through the smoke and grabbing Saluria by the collar as if it were nothing. He leans closer with a creepy smile and tells the priestess that it's finally time to give all that dark power. Dagura grips Tilty with iron and shouts for her to finally give that supreme power. Saluria screams for him to stop, but Dagura threatens to kill each of them if he does not get what he wants. The man does not move, only laughs, while meanwhile a huge wave of dark energy begins to swirl across the territory. It completely covers him. He drools and is possessed by the feeling of how the power of darkness finally asserts itself. Saluria finds herself trapped right in the middle of the wave. Through the screams and chaos, she calls Tilty's name with a pleading voice. Tilty looks through and sees a vision. Her mother tells her that everything will be fine. She catches the impulse she needs. Even with tears in her eyes, she tells herself she will manage. Saluria freezes from complete shock, just staring at Tilty, while everything around begins to change sharply. Tilty holds her position and declares that she is no longer afraid of the dark. Now she will be in control. Dark energy responds to her, bursting from the ground in huge, sharp waves around Saluria. Tilty is completely exhausted. Voices of pain and sorrow flood her consciousness, making her feel she can no longer endure. Finally, she lets out a huge scream, clutching her head amid the dark surge. Saluria runs to meet her fate and calls her by name, while Tilty falls to her knees, barely holding herself together as her consciousness seems to literally fall apart, yet she still finds the strength to tell Saluria that she is okay. It turns out this dark force reacts directly to all the bad things Tilty is feeling now. And she understands everything. To truly take control of this energy, she must win the battle against her own emotions. She was honestly scared all those sad and painful things she had to go through might prove too heavy to handle. And even when Dagura holds her captive, she reaches out into the darkness and asks for a favor. Tears run down her face, and she begs the power not to turn into something that only multiplies suffering. Instead, she prays that all this becomes a force capable of bringing happiness to everyone. Dagura looks completely stunned and asks what is even happening right now. When the darkness begins to flow around them in a whole wave, and Tilty still holds her position. Suddenly, these gigantic shadowy hands burst out of the ground and grab Dagura. And he starts losing control, shouting that someone is grabbing his hand while the shadows wrap around him from all sides. Tilty holds her position and shouts into the darkness, ordering it to listen to her. And then she simply takes action, shooting the dog or striking its back with a cannon blast, and the wave of energy makes him scream. Saluria just sits on the ground, completely stunned by what she sees, but a barely noticeable smile appears on her face, and she whispers that Tilty really managed to overcome it. Watching Tilty stand firm against the dark force, Saluria realizes she truly controls the darkness. And Tilty brings her hands together as if aiming with her gaze, and says that she is much stronger than all this sorrow. Dagura is completely caught in a shadow grip. He squeezes tighter and tighter until he begins to lose control and screams, demanding that this thing let him go. Tilty does not retreat. She calls the darkness to trap him while she puts everything she has into the spell. Having run everything through a magical crystal ball, the mysterious man finds the image quite impressive. A country man in a mask stands nearby and insists that this is definitely the true power of the Dark Priestess. But he knows there is much more there. The abyss of darkness is still too deep to comprehend. He just looks and utters the name Tilty as if expecting something else to happen now. They return to the fight. Dagura screams in pain as the shadow squeezes him, and Tilty dryly orders him to surrender already. Saluria from the corner of the stage watches, smiling widely and completely stunned by the incredible tricks Tilty performs. Dagura's face is twisted from a giant scream. The power of darkness begins to completely flood him. He can barely make a sound anymore, and only his hand sticks out and the shadows swallow him. From the darkness extends a terrible hand covered with eyes reaching forward, grabbing everything that is left. A powerful burst of energy tears space into pieces. She staggers and sends it back until Tilty wheezes from pain. Saluria tries to cover her eyes and says that the darkness is eating in too strongly, but she doesn't believe they were blown away by the explosion. While Tilty sits on the ground trying to understand what the hell just happened, they both raise their gaze upward and see a small winged figure hanging far above them, leaving. This demon-like winged monster and too many eyes hanging from above just hangs in the air, stretching a disgusting smile. The beast above glances at Tilty, beckons her with a cheeky gesture, and directly states that it will kill her. Celuria, shocked, examines the beast and barely utters words saying that this thing actually flies. But Tilty looks even more frightened. She says dog or utters her own name and instantly realizes that it is not him. She watches as the monster hovers above them and mutters. It's obvious what they are looking at is not human. The monster only smiles even wider and orders her to die, extending its huge clawed hand. Celuria screams from her throat begging Tilty to just get out of there. Tilty freezes, her eyes fully widen as soon as she realizes she doesn't have time to move. And suddenly Sold, and in the next moment he flies onto the stage while Sottle shouts for him to stop. They land heavily as if a gigantic explosion of dust and light clears the space around. When Celuria lifts her gaze to them with a giant smile, she completely relaxes. Help has finally arrived. Tilty also looked at them, and her face flared up as soon as the boys stood between her and that thing. Celuria shouts to her big brothers Dale and Rake and asks if they are really okay. Later, the rift to the demon world finally closes, and the company heads back to the city. One of the knights calls out from the front of the carriage, while the others Sold and as if sitting in the back. The team notices smoke rising from the estate as soon as they approach the city. Everyone gathers outside behind the walls to make a clear plan. Dusher explains he and Mike decided to fly ahead of the others thanks to Mike's wind magic. As soon as they arrive, Sold asks how Dogra returned from that world, and Lake stares at the disgusting monster trying to figure out what kind of creature it is. Celuria grabs her brother's hand and says that Dogra wore a very creepy bracelet. She says as soon as that object began to glow strangely, Dogra completely transformed into that monster. Sold finally realizes that this object was in the game and begins to guess. Maybe it really is a cursed thing. It turns out it is a cursed instrument that can actually turn a person into a demon. And the whole group is confused when a hoarse voice laughs and calls Sold a brat, as if he finally appeared. The monster stands in the dust and repeats again that he will kill. And yes, again and again and again again. The little dog tears with his voice so much that it seems everyone must die, and releases a huge wave of dark energy. While Like shouts for them to dodge, Sold grabs Celuria and pulls her away, saving her from the blow. And the monster just stands and watches as destruction covers everything around, while his power flares and lights up the entire area. Everyone freezes and stares at the huge cloud of dust where the explosion hit. But, meanwhile, the blast wave continues to harshly tear up the ground and scatter debris in all directions. But Number, can I really see what is happening with his manners? And Tilty says she herself cannot come to her senses, so much magical power flows from this guy that it takes your breath away. Celuria calls her brother, and the Sold one tightly clenches his fist. A thought flashes in his head, if only he had a saber, at least something to defend himself with. Suddenly a hand appears, stretches forward and orders Saul to take the sword he is holding. It confuses everyone. Everyone shouts Eins. He stands here, all covered in blood, barely standing on his feet, and then apologizes Celuria. He confirmed the deal and shouted his name one last time exactly at the moment when the old man loses strength and falls right on the spot. Sold grabs the sword hilt and thanks himself. Then he just did everything right, otherwise everything would have turned out differently. He almost screams, asks everyone to focus on the wounded, but Celuria just stares at Sold and shockingly sees him step forward. Saul says he takes this fight upon himself, and Celuria just watches as her older brother goes to meet the monster. Celuria tries to keep herself together, tells Tilty that everything will be fine and that this story will end soon. Soul tells Dagari that now he will show him what's what, while his blade flares with a bright heat. He releases the flame of the legendary Black Dragon, swinging the sword in a huge arc of fire. Tilty is completely knocked off her feet by the flaming sword, and she flashes. Is this the first time she sees a new deadly technique? The monster goes mad and screams about the sword. You can see how the terrible heat pressing on it flies straight at him. Or the dog rushes into attack and screams, as if demanding a soul to death, and the boy breaks out with a roar and rushes straight at him. They both collide. An explosion of fire and dark energy tears the air between them. The monster's claw cuts into the power of Solodaraz. A sharp, bloody explosion flares up. A super powerful wave of energy explodes outward and completely fills the yard. Dagura is thrown back by the impact force. He lets out a wild roar as he falls and loses balance. Like in Celuria, you watch and you just can't believe it until Tilty starts screaming wildly, filled with drive. My soul, look, he just stands there calm while the smoke disperses, although his blade is already broken. At the impact site, a huge crater, and it clearly shows everyone the power this boy possessed. As soon as he said this, a chilling laugh comes from the smoke. In Celuria, something tightens in her chest as she asks what is happening. At that very moment, Dagura forcibly gets to his feet and looks as if this is a complete nightmare. He hasn't sweated like this for a long time, and now he's shaking in hysteria, screaming that it's impossible for Dogra to still be alive. But the monster just opens its jaws and declares its attack Dark Prominence to finish this once and for all. Dagura spreads his arms wide, and dark energy wildly bursts through his entire body. Making Sold gasps for breath and asks what he is even doing, while everyone, as if in Siluria, stare in total shock, cannot believe their own eyes. The light from the monster's face becomes so dazzling that it cuts out everything from reality and beyond it, as if there is nothing. The entire area disappears in a colossal burst of energy. Everyone instantly looks up and down, split by the light. Then with a scream, he announces that this is a self-destructive move, naming the Soul Siluria scream like this. In the city, people go mad, pointing at the sky and having no idea what this light is. When a giant sphere of destructive power hangs over the city right above the Heart-Minute state. With its attack, it drives the inhabitants insane. The light falls directly on the mansion. While Sold stands still, feeling the furious pressure of magic, he realizes he does not have it. A sword to stop all this, so they order Siluria. Evacuate everyone nearby while they fuss and look for salvation. Sold's heart falls as he realizes he won't make it in time. But just as he almost gave up, suddenly a girl appears before him. Everything is so shaky that she tells her older brother to give it to her. While Sold stands still, they are covered by complete silence. They are completely stunned and call her name because she shouts at him, just believe in her, and shouting releases what has accumulated. This is all the crazy dark energy. It cannot be. I don't believe that the seller really. Controlling this thought, have I finally found the power that she does not lose to the darkness. She restrains a gigantic reserve of strength. Above the house she growls because she feels this might can tear her off and carry her away. Because the entire territory is already starting to rumble and shake from the pressure. Tilty uses everything she has and makes the last surge, pleadingly shouting to the dark energy. Blow away every crumb of the enemy from the earth. The windlock activates a huge whirlwind, covers the territory, trapping her in a snare. The monster completely loses vigilance. A strange sound bursts out as the swirling air vortex begins to tear his attack to shreds while he freezes in pure shock and shouting fires, "What the hell is even happening to me right now?" Siluria raises her gaze, eyes wide open. She cannot believe that suddenly the sky is filled with a colossal amount of wind magic. Like calls to Tilty, and Sold shouts to his friends that it's time for them to back her up with everything they have. Siluria right there together with them shouts, they will protect everyone together like a team. Shouting loudly, like loses self-control, and says that they will save the Hartman family and stop this whole part of the city from being completely destroyed. The monster groans in pain as the wind pressure begins to crush his hand, and shouting, calls them all a bunch of cursed, boring wanderers. Tilty tightly clenches her jaw and orders herself. She will not lose. The main thing is that finally everyone can be happy. The monster begins to crumble. Wind magic tears through his body and he can only emit a hoarse sound. A few more last notes, and the giant whirlwind will completely engulf this territory. The pressure becomes unbearable, and the huge hand of the monster tears as if it was ripped in half, and then breaks off. The three press together and release the remnants of magic until the last breath. When the dust settles, we all exhale with relief and say that they really did it so. Siluria nods joyfully and agrees, while everyone standing in front of the house wildly celebrates their huge victory. Tilty, stirred to the edge, rushes straight to Saul, shouts that it is her handiwork and calls him her big brother. Sold stood motionless in place, and on his face was an empty gaze, complete, utterly silent astonishment. And Tilty suddenly fully understands what she just did, and begins to repeat these words with all the visible awkwardness. Sold quickly broke out of that uncomfortable stupor, pressed her to himself in a strong embrace, and said that she was incredible. That old, oppressive feeling fills everything inside, and suddenly it becomes unbearably heavy for him, as if the entire burden fell on his shoulders at once. Tilty just laughs and giggles joyfully, hugging him, but he cannot. He cannot stop thinking about that magic she just used. It is terrible. It swallows and erases any darkness it touches. And that is why, despite everything, she is the strongest among the villains in the game world. She stands there with a dark aura visible as she draws in power born of pure despair. Betrayed, he hugs her tighter and swears to himself that from now on he will never allow such power to fall into the hands of someone evil. He moves on, surveys the area, and says that since the estate was evacuated, no one was actually harmed. So Sold. It is clear that he is truly pleased to hear everyone is safe. In his thoughts, he returns to the attack and asks whether Dagura was sent there by Walger's order. But does not believe it. He says that Walger may be a fool, but not so much as to act so stubbornly while he. The true goal of this guy is ultimately to take control of the entire city. While he explains, Valger looks too tense. If the townspeople find out he killed them, he will face complete condemnation. So he thinks that the 90 chance is just Dog Aura staging a personal massacre. He recalls how Dog Aura looked like a complete monster, obsessed with killing Sold. When Sold intervenes and says he is almost certain, the cursed tool Siluria mentioned is what triggered this whole rampage. Frey and Siluria watch as Like reacts with complete shock, repeatedly saying the words cursed tool as if he cannot believe it. Next he explains, it is a cursed piece of equipment. Once worn, the owner gains insane demonic power. He starts reviewing his knowledge about the game and notices, It is a rare item that usually only appears in the magic dimension. His mind rummages like the pages of an old document he once read. It said that a person gains such power, but at the cost of being consumed by evil. And Frey agrees. She also noticed that Dagora's bracelet exudes eeriness and is already overflowing with magic. The group stands together among the ruins while like wonders who could even give such a thing to someone like Dagora. Saul concludes, if it's not Valgar, then it must be a group known as the Titans, a dark organization operating behind the scenes. Sold begins to be overwhelmed by thoughts about the Titans and freezes in contemplation. Could it be that from the very beginning their main goal was to capture Tilty? It gets heavier with every second, especially when he realizes Dagora could actually cut each of them down. Sold admits that it's true, yet still cannot comprehend what the Titans truly desire in the long run. And just when everything quiets down, Siluria suddenly says that she is fine, but this phrase definitely throws everyone off balance. An incredibly focused expression appears on her face, and she shouts that she will not lose to the guys from the Titans. She is ready to fight too. Saul just looks at her and his thoughts immediately return to Tilty and the danger she found herself in. So here it is. They are cut off mid-sentence to declare. Their strength is a real commodity, and honestly it was incredible to watch. Frey laughs and says they trained well for a full 3 days, but Cell is completely stunned. He thought it was only 1. He explains that they were supposed to be only in that demonic dimension 24 hours, but adds, time moves differently there. His click breaks through gaming awareness triggers. A day spent in that dimension always turns into 3 days in the real world. It sounds like they really got down to the climb, with Sold and Tilty as a pair, and their team is now almost unbeatable. Sold stares at Tilty and thinks, her power is essentially the most powerful thing that exists in this world. It is the legendary might of the final boss of the game, a sinister power mostly known as the power of despair. He begins to imagine the dark fate of ruin that awaits her ahead, grabs Tilty by the shoulders, while Siluria just marvels. Why is her brother behaving so strangely? He groans as if he has failed all his sales, and the thought of her future weighs so heavily that it completely overwhelms him. And Tilty immediately notices, asks if he is okay because he suddenly looks as if a ghost has just appeared before his eyes. Sold tries to stay calm and says he is fine, but Siluria sees, something is definitely wrong. Like, everything starts to blur for him, and at that moment he realizes his head just doesn't work as it should. Working right anymore. Tilty looks at him with wide-open eyes, pure horror in his gaze. In Siluria, he drives both of them crazy and they scream in shock when they see him start to collapse. Sold's legs give way, he falls to the ground, and 3 of them immediately scramble to help him. Siluria froze in place and stared motionlessly as everything happened right before her. While Lake starts to scream, and Tilty looks as if she is about to break down both of them. They scatter and run to the middle of the yard. Siluria and Lick shout his name as soon as they catch up. And later that night at the estate, everything finally begins to quiet down. When Bobo explains that this is a pure case of mana depletion, she says, apparently the Protona was simply overwhelmed after using too much magic. But she did it herself. Tell them not to panic, he will be just fine once he rests properly. Tinty-like and Siluria stand by his bed and watch over him while he sleeps. Like points out how strange it is that Sold even has mono depletion since he shouldn't be able to use magic. So, that crazy sword technique, probably because of it, he says that. Honestly, it's a mystery how that guy draws so much power while remaining. Siluria just stood still and looked at him from head to toe, quietly calling her older brother. Sold fainted with a towel on his head, and it became clear. The reason for his collapse is by no means a secret, but incredible exhaustion from using the demon god style. But in reality, the child learns the specific details of everything that happened to him only much later. And as soon as he lies like that, the knights burst into the room together and scream wildly. Searching for the young master and the princess, the soul has already gone too far, he won't even understand what's happening. He lies on the floor. Vegan, Audrey, and Rash burst inside panic. They heard what happened and want to know if he is really okay. As if step by step calming everyone down, he insists, Soul just needs a good rest and will be back on his feet in a moment. For the guards, this is a real relief. Zveg is simply glad he is safe, and Audrey says to pray for his speedy recovery. And then Zveg suddenly changes his tone. He begins to speak as if they actually returned what he asked for. And then Mike just gives her a cool thumbs-up gesture and a smile as if he has everything under control. While Tilty stands still, frozen with her mouth agape, trying to piece together what they actually found. Until she sees Zweig holding a huge glowing crystal above his head. She asks if it is a magic stone, and he says, yes, she hit the mark exactly. Vadrine in wigs shows trophies, and tells how she managed to successfully obtain the magic stone after the black dragon fell. And it turns out to be a scheme with a giant payout no less than $1 billion. Soulike decides to use the money to pay for repairs in the city, since the stone officially belongs to him. Tilty just stands still, completely stunned and trying to comprehend the scale of it all. Until she finally snaps out of it, she comes to her senses and says she has a specific request. The knights are completely confused by her sudden seriousness, especially Zweig, who looks overly impressed. And even so, he can only blink in confusion, guessing what exactly Tai might demand now. Tilty just looks ahead, her eyes burning with pure determination. Meanwhile, the rest of the town falls silent under the starry sky. But at Frey's forge, as before, he does not sleep, tirelessly striking the anvil with a hammer. Frey stops working and lifts his glasses. He has no idea who could have come to the smithy so late. She opens the door and sees Tilty standing there with a cart and addresses the girl. What could have gone wrong? Tilty just smiles and reminds her of the promise they made, while Lake stands straight behind her, luxuriously proud of himself. The phrase Jed watch jaw drops, and she looks completely stunned by what is being shown to her. It turns out they brought that huge magical rock right into her shop, and she can't believe her eyes. Tilty shines with excitement, finally reached the Frey's place with the goods. Frey begins to sweat as soon as he realizes Tilty really brought all the magical stones they found, and this. When Tilty, sunk in a deep bow, begs Frey to use these stones to forge a special sword for her older brother. She suddenly becomes serious and explains, ordinary blades just break because they can't compete with his insane skill. And even when his equipment fails, he still fights fully to keep everyone safe. Tilty pours out her heart without stopping, lying low and insisting she will hold on until she collapses. And she knows, if he really had a magical sword stone, he could finally fight without holding back in anything. She admits asking for such a thing is like begging for insanely expensive things, yet she still doesn't stop begging Frey. While the rest of the crew just stands silently watching her, give her everything you have to help her brother. Siluria looks depressed when she says that the Tilty mansion is still half covered in spots, and they need a lot of money to fix everything. But right before his eyes, his facial expression changes and he says, after all, it all comes down to money. Eyes and Audrey also join the conversation, reminding everyone that the sold sword saved many lives. There is more added. And Siluria adds without a shadow of doubt, in the future it will save many more people. Tilty begins to tremble with tears because he suddenly realizes such value has no substitute in money. So, he turns back to the blacksmith, beams a big smile and says, forward, use every magical stone they brought. Saul really deserved this. He has already proven to everyone that these efforts were not in vain. Between Tilty's sincere desire and Rake's thoughtful plan, events finally moved from a deadlock. Rake manages to pull a huge magical stone into Frey's hands, and just then, as the blacksmith looks him over, says, the magic inside is insane, so this job will be a real challenge. Tilty's appearance is fully visible and she begs, use that power to forge a sword. An anxious pause. Tilty desperately looks around, remembering how pitiful she looked back when they first met, compared to how they are now. The same harsh expression froze on her face. She wore it not just for show, because she is fighting for her older brother. She strokes Tilty's head and asks, leave this to her. She promises to forge the best sword anyone has ever seen, and adds that Tilty must tell Saldo to stop wasting life, even in his dreams. Tilty responds to her with a broad smile and says, thank you for everything. As it turns out, Tilty was much stronger than everyone thought, while no one was watching. And by the next morning, the whole town gathers in the square to find out what happened. Like steps onto the stage with Siluria and announces to everyone, the villain Dagora attacked yesterday, but now they can finally relax and rest peacefully. He shouts at the top of his lungs that he killed Dagora, loud enough for everyone in the crowd to hear the news. People completely lose control. They burst into applause and start praying because finally the villain is gone forever and they can breathe out. They incessantly chant for Lake and Siluria, celebrating the victory as if this city had never experienced anything better. Everyone shouts that Lake is a hero and wishes long years to the Hartman family, while Siluria just stands and absorbs every word, every exclamation. He turns his back to the crowd and says that he did not do it alone, because the real one who saved them was the one who stood up when Dagora attacked, and then everything looked completely hopeless. He explains, before the attack, a furious demonic dimension opened Yupan. They even had to measure strength with the legendary dragon. Lake keeps the story going and directly pours it into the crowd, telling about the brutal fight to the death against the Black Dragon. He speaks to them directly and honestly, admitting that at that moment, his own legs were completely frozen with fear. And then he tells everyone, next to him stood a friend who was the one who helped him gather courage and finally take a step forward. And he talks about this boy. He was smaller than him and couldn't even cast a single spell, but still believed in his path. He explained how the boy raised a sword and worked until he became strong, and that no trials stopped him because he is the true hero. He is the one who saved the whole city. He points to him in front of the entire crowd, thank you very much. And he shouts his name at the top of his voice, introducing the son of the Ranger family, Sold Ranger. He raises his fist and orders everyone to surrender for that guy who risked his life and is now resting. And the whole square goes crazy, chanting for the soul of the Lord and calling him the hero of the city. They all shout for the Ranger family, and Ken Williams suddenly realizes that his own speech has turned him into a legend. Returning to the mountains, Gallant simply works in the fields like any other day and has no idea that his fame is rising higher and higher, while Marrow's wife calls him, "Take a break." Returning to the ceremony, he keeps the pace and makes the crowd clearly understand Sold is not the only hero worth praising here. Gallant makes sure everyone knows Sold's sister was nearby, fighting alongside him. He brings Tilty out to the whole crowd and shouts for everyone to give her proper greetings. And right now the spotlight presses on Tilty as the crowd begins to lose control. In response, people start a loud chorus, laughing out loud and shouting "Long live Lady Tilty" and "Long live the Ranger brothers and sisters," showing everyone that they have become the main stars of the whole town. Tilty only barely smiles. She understands that this is part of Like's plan to win the city over to her side so that enemies find it much harder to interfere and hinder her. While the Hartman name rises higher than ever, the reputation of all the corrupt nobles plunges into the abyss, and the energy of the crowd only adds fuel to the fire for the scoundrels. Walger Debbie returned to his place, losing his mind, holding his head and furiously cursing the Hartmans and Rangers to hell with them all for ruining everything. He shakes with rage. He stubbornly tells himself that his family is the only one truly worthy of ruling the city, but reality is already hitting him sharply and shamelessly. He cannot believe that the townspeople ignore him to praise a bunch of troublemakers. And the more he runs it through his head, the less he can understand how everything turned out the way it did. His face almost darkens to purple when he spreads this version, blaming all the mess on Dagura. Allegedly, he went rogue and acted on his own discretion. Valger completely loses it, grabs his hair, trembles with sweat, and cannot understand why he is being blamed. He sincerely believes he did nothing wrong. A voice sharply cuts off his whining briefly without mercy, stating, "All this chaos is on his conscience." At that moment, a mysterious figure in a fur cloak enters the room. The visitor reminds Valger that he was already warned. This was his last chance, and the nobleman can only let out a frightened squeak when he looks up. In the corner stands Brother Tilty, truly formidable. He points out, Valger still managed to fail in capturing the Dark Priestess, so the nobleman is forced to beg for mercy from his master. Tilty lowers his gaze on Walger with these cold and sharp eyes, and says that he is completely helpless. That's why he had to appear and take everything upon himself personally, because Valger could not handle it alone. Valger is still on his knees, twitching in despair and shifting the blame, shouting that it is not his fault and that it was the Hartman family who destroyed everything. Brother Tilty only gives a dark, muted laugh and says, "Very well," as if immediately moving on to the next move, turning away from the frightened nobleman. At the Hartman estate, Tilty was suddenly stopped by something she did not expect, while her brother recalled that the Dark Priestess would linger for some time. Standing on the balcony, a masked man explains that the darkness is only growing, and that it feeds on the emotions of everyone involved. The narrator emphasizes, Saluria's power throughout this whole mess with Dagura has actually become much stronger, and it will only intensify the further it moves forward, the hotter it becomes. Returning to the estate, Valger was completely confused and asked how the master made Dagru go insane. But Brother Tilty simply orders him to stay calm because he has a specific question. He asks Ualger if he still wants to be the one who rules this city. Ualger does not hesitate and answers yes. So the masked man offers to give him the power to rule over all. He speaks of the power of darkness, and this confuses Valger even more, and Brother Tilty explains he will use Valger's own greed for all this to happen and reaches out his hand to the nobleman. While he continues babbling about this dark power, Valger suddenly panics and shouts at his master. A terrifying mass of dark energy spreads out, and the eyes begin to absorb everything around. The voice insists that this power must be made to grow, so next comes. A horrible scream strikes the walls and echoes all the way to the very end. Watching from the window, Brother Tilty notices the soul of the young swordsman is actually the key to Tilty's development. Brother Tilty freezes, staring into space, and runs through the thought about that swordsman ranger. The power from his magical sword looks too much like darkness. He mutters that the truth will soon surface, and laughs to himself, wondering what will explode in the next experiment. Returning to the house, he was completely drained, so much that even steam seemed to evaporate from him, and he collapsed into bed. He says that when he finally woke up, he did not immediately realize new chaos was just beginning to unfold. He is just lying with his eyes closed and turning thought after thought, as if he had nothing, absolutely no reason to know what will happen next. Here in the smithy, the light still burns late at night, and the sound of the hammer striking the metal spreads with a ringing. Inside, Frey works diligently and grumbles that this magical stone stubbornly does not yield, but she does not give up. She raises the hammer high and commands the stone, "Go on the attack," because she will forge it under any circumstances, and with her mad gaze is full of determination. Frey swears to turn all this into the greatest sword ever made. While Sold sleeps peacefully, Frey's voice echoes with a promise. Let him just wait and see what she is preparing. 3 days have passed since Dagura was removed, and Tilty and Siluria stand there focused, very serious. In the room, Siluria glanced at the bed and says that her older brother does not wake up at all. While she tries to stay positive and assures Tilty that everything will get better very soon, Tilty can only agree. Sold says that all this time he was still sleeping, not even getting up. But he had no idea that a completely new threat was already tightening a ring around them just then. Zweig burst into the room, fluttering inside, and shouted that the young master is calling them both right now. Siluria asks what happened to her brother, and Zweig only shouts that they have appeared again. See you next time. Outside, the city cracks with chaos. People rush, saving their own lives, while fires flare up simultaneously everywhere. The townspeople shout over each other with cries about demons that have emerged. There are too many to handle. Old stories whisper, when people are distorted by cursed tools, they turn into those things into magic. Like tells the girls, there is a report about the edge, it looks just like a dog, or about how it is now being torn to pieces. Inside the office, the night report solemnly announces, someone has taken up the cursed instruments again. And as if a click had started, he shouts that the strongest forces of the Hartman family will stop everything so that the damage does not spread further. He glances at the team and asks Audrey, Zweig, and Silri if they can be counted on, and they almost instantly agree to the plan. Everything moves fast without delay. And returning to Tilty, he says that she will also have to lend him her power for this fight. Tilty looks quite happy at the opportunity to help, and tells Reich that she is undoubtedly in agreement. The light gives the final orders. I will deal with the chaos from the manor while the team goes into battle. Smoke and flames begin to envelop the city, while the attack grows increasingly brutal. The locals start losing control, so the knights do everything to evacuate everyone from the area and ensure safety. Right in the middle of the street, 3 mages appear and start smashing everything in sight. Imagined creatures wandered near the streets in one place and with the same laughter. They repeatedly ran through the plan to destroy everything. And the leading monster drives straight into the frame and fixes its gaze on the camera, as if consumed by an obsession to erase the entire city. The Hartman Knights waste no time. They immediately activate Aqua Lance, followed by a combo with Rock Axe, which throws the creature back into flight. It crashes on its back onto the cobblestones in the middle of the stone street, while at night they regroup. One said, the demon looks terrifying, it's scary, but the partner just shrugs, these freaks are weak compared to the black dragon they will have to fight sooner. They had already decided the fight was over, but suddenly the monster's clawed hand on the ground begins to twitch. One of the knights barely manages to come to his senses, and the creature fires a giant beam of energy straight at them. The blast breaks the buildings behind them. A huge explosion scatters wood and glass in all directions. A nighttime scramble for shelter begins. They cannot believe what they see, and one of them says it must be some kind of joke because the monster rose to its feet again and is still flying after them, although its head was completely blown off by the explosion. The monster is not going to fall and stay down, and Siluria perfectly understands. This creature is as stubborn as that demon dog was back then, so it's time to say goodbye. She steps forward and spins her magic, summoning an air hatch. The windlock spell, and the creature is trapped in a giant swirling whirlwind. Siluria shouts for Tilty to take the lead, and Tilty is gladly ready to rush to help. She pushes her hands forward and commands the darkness to crush their enemies, and giant dark claws soar into the sky, shackling everyone. Covering the wind trap, they completely engulf the monsters with a mixture of shadow and wind magic, while the Night Watch keeps a vigilant eye. The Hartman Knights sound the alarm. In reality, Tilty is too strong. But Tilty just laughs. Siluria is already analyzing the fight and thinks these demons are weaker than Dagora. The monsters are still growling and trying to fight back, and Siluria points out, there are still 2 left, they need to finish them off. Tilty gets fired up with excitement and swears to do everything possible, then runs forward alongside Siluria to end the fight. But suddenly a deep voice cuts them off. It asks what the hell they think they are doing, and everyone freezes dead still as a heavy armored boot thunders onto the ground. It's Mobrib and the rest of the Debbie Hypnites. They appear as a whole pack, and it looks like they're about to cause real trouble. Siluria recognizes him at first glance. It's Mobrib, and the Hartman Knights immediately guess he is the royal guard of the Divihip family who. He tells them that they are finally here and that now everyone must work together to save the city. But as soon as he finishes speaking, the group, "What are you doing?" they ask, because his face distorts and additional eyes begin to sprout all over his skin. While Tilty and Siluria can only stare in complete shock and hope that what they see is not real. With the onset of night, panic overwhelms them completely. One of Mobrib's huge eyes suddenly bulges out as he utters his last shout in honor of Lord Walter. Then a devastatingly bright light flashes and everyone is overwhelmed by one question. This is the power of the cursed artifact. Just before, the group panics and jumps back as a massive clawed hand rushes through the air where people just were. The one who started Mobrib growled about how Lord Valger will rule everything, while other knights call Hartman an enemy. In the next video, we will return with a new video. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video, 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 see you in the next video. See you in the next video, 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 see you in the next video. See you in the next video, 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 see you in the next video. Transformation complete. Now they are all mindless beasts with too many mouths and eyes. Tilty and others realize. The worst has happened. All those guards, every single one without exception, have turned into demons. Teluria barely squeezes out words until horror unfolds before her eyes, and she calls her brother while. In Tilty's group everything falls apart, and the narrative, as if in reverse, throws back to what happens next with. Outside Soul's house, everything looks quite calm, at least for now, at the mansion. But in his own room he is already asleep, having fallen into bed, and suddenly it turns out, he is covered by a marvelous dream. And his eyes suddenly snap open as if he saw something he cannot believe. Then we are carried into his vision. Above him stand two giant spirit beasts as if looming with their whole bodies. And here the solid creatures begin to speak and assure him, the power they share is actually the power of a demon. They warn him strictly, the more he uses this power, the more he gives his body to darkness. Eventually he will turn into a monster who will have to forever abandon humanity. The beasts loom over him one last time and ask the Soul Ranger what his next step will be. The spiritual beasts keep pressing on the soul. They do not care whether it will turn into a demon or lose humanity. But the soul does not look worried at all, it only replies that his fate was decided long ago. Standing between the two huge creatures he shouts, his only goal is to protect his treacherous sister. And then he stretches out his hand to the spirits, ordering them to be silent and follow his example. The beasts seem to accept his determination and proclaim that this is the true power of the devil god style. Meanwhile, in the real world, Frey appears at Ranger Family Manor, dragging some equipment behind her. She cuts through everything in her path without ceremony, bursts through the front door and shouts for someone to immediately say where Sold is. The housekeeper and the guard are completely confused. They fuss, try to stop her, and feverishly ask what she needs. Frey casually waves them off, declaring that she is a friend, and demands to be shown his room, although the housekeeper warns. He still needs to rest. She does not listen. She swings open the bedroom door and exclaims that he is still sleeping. Finally, Sold moves from his place. You move, and he himself stands by the window, stretches out his hand and checks the strength, as if this is his victory for. Suddenly Frey appears with a big smile, winks, and says she sees that he has finally woken up, while Boba just stands looking completely stunned. Sold gives her a warm smile and replies that he literally just opened his eyes. So she steps forward and hands him a long roll wrapped in cloth, saying that she finished the thing she promised. Frey looks quite satisfied when she tells him that she made it especially for him. Sold's eyes light up. He is already fully excited and repeats over and over that this is a sword made only for him. And then the truth is revealed. Before him is a truly impressive weapon, a sword from Sold, also known as the Luminous Blade or Magic Light Sword. Soldier freezes in complete shock, asks again if the name is really like that, before noticing how easy and beautiful it sounds. Frey confidently folds his arms on his chest and says that the light blade will definitely respond to his style of magical sword, and Solda understands. In the game, this is a true legendary final weapon. It is obtained only at the end, so it is the strongest sword in the whole world. Frey tells Soul to be careful with the new weapon, and this momentarily throws him off balance. Explaining, she honestly adds, even as the one who created the sword, she does not know the limits of its power. Frey looks a little worried and says she hopes the blade will not respond too violently to his magic and will not become a danger to him. Soul just stands still, holding the sword, and replies to her not to worry, he will manage because he knows it. He begins to think about the future, imagining these huge monsters and dragons he will have to face, knowing that with this new magical lightsaber, as soon as it touches the enemy, it will cut through everything that stands in the way. Seeing his confidence, Frey cannot help but throw a short proud glance, then she looks away and listens to the order. He orders him to move exactly at the moment when a scream is heard from outside. A monster has appeared in the town, and everything is already cracking at the seams. The peace disappears instantly, and smoke and flames are already rising from the nearby buildings, while the crowd of monsters begins to stream through the streets, forcing everyone to panic and seek shelter. Zweig shouts that they are in real trouble. The odds are completely against them, and the knight nearby commands do not get distracted and hold the line. Teluria bursts from the spot and shouts that everything is fine, she will protect Tilty. Whatever happens, Tilty can only watch and call her name in return. One of the masked bandits rushed into attack, shouting for them to die for Lord Walga, and then suddenly, a huge head made of energy falls straight from the sky, completely shocking everyone on the battlefield. Teluria raises her gaze to the barrage of attacks with wide-open eyes and instantly understands. She definitely knows what kind of creature this is. Black Dragon Fire Strike cleaves the ground with incredible force, completely wiping the entire area off the face of the earth. The explosion tears a huge smoking crater in the middle of the street and scatters the bandits in all directions. Siluria cannot hold back and lets out a joyful scream as soon as she sees exactly who is standing there. Tilty calls out Solda's name aloud, and Siluria loudly cheers for her older brother as soon as he finally appears. His whole look is as if he came to fight without compromise. The soul just stands still, those dark marks on the face and herself a confident smile as if victory is already in the pocket. The bandits were confused, lost control, and started shouting at the boy saying he ruined their plans. Saul does not even flinch. He only holds the blade high and commands the spirit living in the sword to respond. And it releases a huge ice wolf, the flash signals the start, and the frozen energy tears in waves across the entire zone. Sold moves as if dissolving in a blur, cutting right through the middle of the enemy formation and scattering everyone in his path. Hartman Knights explode with applause and shouts until Siluria rushes forward with a big smile on her face. While the ice crystals settle, she immediately jumps up and throws herself into Saul's arms, and he remains in place sword in hand. Siluria begins to cry with happiness. He is okay. And the spirit only gives her a gentle smile and says he is sorry for scaring everyone, especially Tilty. Other members surround him in a pack, and Zweig and Ani raise a cheer. How glad they are that he finally came to his senses and is back in formation. Saul looks at his friends and replies. He is simply happy that Siluria and all of them are safe. Zweig says those final moves were just insane, but Audra is even more shocked by something else. The sword didn't even break, although it had to withstand so much force. Frey looks at the aftermath with a quiet smile and says that it is finally over. And he even nods along with them, as if understanding how everything happened, while Siluria watches both of them and smiles widely. The sword itself is incredible. It withstands the icy blows of the ice wolf and the flames of the black dragon. It does not crack, does not break because. Sold holds the blade high so everyone can see, and says that this tool was made specifically for using Majin style. And he stands there proudly, telling the knights that this is a one-of-a-kind sword in the whole world. Siluria almost jumps for joy when she tells Frey that she really forged the best sword just as she promised. Frey replies that it's not just about the weapon and adds, Sold's techniques have become many times stronger. Sold nods. The sword turned out to be extremely reliable. But everything changes as soon as Leta's face shows a worried expression, and he doesn't understand why Imagine ended up here at all. Nearby, the city is being destroyed, a fire breaks out and the knights run out to help deal with this chaos. So, Ainz watches as smoke rises above the houses and immediately understands. He must return to the side of the young master at once. Audrey notices that the Walger soldiers begin to turn into Majins and involuntarily thinks, could all this be the work of their leader who forces them to act this way? She is almost drawn into the thought that the Debbie Hip family might be pulling the strings, but as soon as Siluria shouts, her gaze catches a ray of the future. Like calls her when she sinks into tears. The clairvoyance gives her a vision that fills her with mortal fear. And then she tells them that the whole city is in danger, and Lee is in terrible peril, so she sets off from Seoul and asks what exactly she sees. In the vision, a huge shadow with glowing eyes rises above the houses, as if darkness is about to swallow everything around. Saul raises his sword with a determined look, ready to unleash power and slash through everything coming at them. For now, in the main noble mansion above the city rooftops, clouds begin to roll in. Urgency drives someone. He rushes down the corridor, boots clanking on the floor, heading straight to the office. A pair of large double doors are kicked open with a bang, and a loud boom fills the space. Like a storm breaking into the room, rumbling, shouting the name Walger is heard, but the nobleman does not move, quietly sitting at his desk holding a glass of wine. Walger looks at him with complete disgust, calls him a cheeky brat, and shouts loudly that he is entering the office without invitation. The man is clearly angry. Though he doesn't look that scary, he shouts that he understands everything but behaves rudely. Officially, he's had enough of everything Walger is doing. He gestures to the right at the nobleman and demands explanations. Apparently, he has reports that Walger's own people in the city are causing all the troubles, and we will meet next time. And Walger just stares at him with that same irritated look and grumbles that this is what trouble turned out to be. Then he asks why he still hasn't left the city, and this completely confuses, forcing to ask what that means. Suddenly, Walger completely loses it, shouting at the top of his lungs that it's all the fault of those trying to play hero and pretending he is some perfect ruler. He screams that Debbie Hip family are the ones really running this city, while Lake and Ainz just watch and are about to expose him for being absolute trash. It's even strange why he admitted it at all now, and he says to Walger, since he knows the truth, for a corrupt nobleman everything is over. In the room, silence freezes for a moment until Walger bursts out with a disgusting laugh, pig-like, mocking Lake, as if to say nothing is truly finished here yet. He declares that all this is just beginning, and seeing the sweat on their faces like the kind Einstein had, they finally begin to understand. Something grand is about to happen. Walger stands behind his desk looking completely stunned when he suddenly realizes he is losing control over the power he used. And then, and this disgusting, many-eyed fleshy lump begins to crawl out of his hand, growing so fast that he can no longer manage it. As if iron cracked with ice from shock, they freeze and stare blankly as the nobleman right before their eyes turns into a complete monster. While Sold and the rest of the team drag him through the city streets, trying to reach the estate as quickly as possible, while Sold asks Celuria if she is 100% sure about that location from her vision, and she answers, yes, so they do not stop and keep pressing forward. But Tilty adds, she feels a colossal shadow in Walger's house, one capable of wiping an entire town off the face of the earth if they do not hurry. She says she will not forgive such disgrace and orders the guys to put an end to it before it's too late. Suddenly the truck drops and stops. He shouts for everyone to wait and points ahead. He has a terribly bad feeling. As soon as Walger's estate begins to crack, the whole building shakes as if an earthquake is hitting only here. And then the roof simply flies apart. Through the stone breaks a huge dark creature with burning eyes as if it is already ready to destroy everything around. The team sells perfect silence. Everyone is confused, silently staring at the mansion until it screams from shock. And then a sprinter crashes through the gates, rushing at full speed and shouting for everyone to retreat while Sold realizes that both he and Inz barely manage to get out. But he does not quiet down, continues shouting that the monster they see is actually Walger, and that the guy used some kind of classifying weapon to change everything. The soul froze there, trying to understand how a person can so quickly turn into something like that. The whole group looks like tiny dots when standing before the record, completely humiliated by its scale. This giant creature starts growling and whining. The city must belong to it alone, and it will not allow anyone to take it. Now before the eyes is something incredibly huge. A solid demon with a skull face and a giant eye right in the middle of its chest. It lets out a deafening roar, declaring that Tilty belongs to it, standing over the crumbling ruins of the mansion. Looking at the complete mess, Sold grimaces with utter disgust and calls this creature a hideous demon. The monster does not care, just looks down and sees in the other's ordinary trash that it is about to wipe off the map. Sold jumped into battle, released a gust of wind, and shouted that he would not allow this to happen and then stop him, shouting that the monster is stupid if it thinks it rules here, because protecting the city is their real job. Sold calls out the name with laid-out words, while Zweig and Celuria watch from the side in fear, shouting and begging their older brother when Ainz gives orders for the coming nights, the young master to watch over them, and everyone, shouting in response, jumps up and prepares for the attack. The whole group looks like tiny ants against the backdrop of a huge demon looming over the rubble, and because of this, the monster becomes even more terrifying as it sinks its empty, dead eyes into them. Everyone pulls together one heavy collective attack, casting magic and stealing, unleashing everything they have at hand onto the beast. But Walger just stands still and calls them unbearable, like a tiny thorn, until the team finally realizes their best shot didn't even leave a scratch on him. The monster only orders them to get lost, and a strange, threatening light begins to grow in its throat. And then it suddenly releases a giant energy beam that surprisingly completely destroys everything in its path. The monster rises above the ruins and breaks the silence with a disgusting, loud laugh that sounds like mockery. The nighttime hustle stirs the air with dust and he shouts, "Check if the young lord and princess got out unharmed." Like declares that they are safe for now. Everyone poured magic into the shield, but Sanu still can't believe how much power is already coming at them. Saul presses closer and gives Walter the pronounced poisonous verdict. He is a monster because he threw away humanity in order to chase his own distorted whims. Walter waves indifferently and hisses that he will wipe every piece of trash in this city off the face of the earth. He unleashes another huge explosion so much that the city is cut like paper. It is Sold and the rest can only freeze in complete shock while the beam levels everything around to the ground. The entire zone bursts into a giant explosion and the monster still stands, a dark silhouette against the flames. Buildings begin to collapse and people scatter in all directions, each striving only to survive. And the local families completely lose their heads. They cry, scream, shout while their home is blown to smithereens. They huddle together helplessly, looking at the ruins of the city and at everyone who suffers total chaos. And finally she completely loses control, shouting the name Walger at the top of her lungs. The giant monster just stands and laughs, while people all over the place run for their lives and cry out for help. But something gigantic catches her by surprise. A huge dragon blazing with flames bites her right in the neck. His soul appears out of nowhere, tears through the air, lunges forward and shouting the name Walger puts everything into this strike. He strikes with a black dragon's fiery claw and the fire instantly engulfs the monster's head. The impact force throws the head back and Sold lands perfectly on a nearby roof. Like calls Solda, shock creaks at full volume, and Celuria calls her older brother. All three fix their gazes, watching the clash unfold. Sold leaves the pose and asks how they liked it, but already looks over his shoulder, checking if he really managed to deal enough damage, and it turns out that The monster has not calmed down yet. Thick black blood begins to ooze from its neck while it just stands in place. The beast lets out a colossal, terrifying roar. The whole area trembles from it. It cannot be calmed for a moment. And it trades watches from the roof while the beast's neck heals right before their eyes. He says he finally sees what is happening and has already figured out the monster. But this means he understood. Before him is the dark giant, a creature that regenerates from any kind of damage. Sold's heart sinks as he remembers. This, it turns out, is the final boss, and it is the one the villain controls at the end of the game, but you won't believe it, but it appeared right here. He wonders if Tilty's rescue changed everything and realizes the fate of this world is shifting much faster than he expected, so he is left speechless. He had to find himself in a very difficult position. In the game, the hero used holy power to win, but Settle knows now he has nothing like that. He thinks about using Tilty's dark power and erasing the monster from the face of the earth, just like he did when fighting Dogra. But he immediately stops himself. He knows that power is too dangerous to joke with because it is. If that darkness becomes even stronger than it is now, it could be the end for her. When Settle panics and realizes that this will only push Tilty faster toward her fate to become the villain he himself was drawn to, he tries to save her from it. Sold stands on the roof and tries to keep everything in place. He tells himself he will have to fight this fate at any cost. Then he looks around and mutters that his sword is somewhere here. It must be found. From the cliff, the view is visible. The city is already a complete field of ruins. A dark giant wanders through the walls and crushes buildings. Meanwhile, the mysterious leader stands at the edge and watches as it all happens. In a mask, the man surveys the destruction and calls it wonderful. That is exactly how he speaks to Mr. Valgar. He recalls how Valgar's insane need to dominate everything finally attracted a huge demonic power. With a grim expression on his face, he says, "The real experiment is only just beginning." He lowers his gaze to the people trembling with fear in the streets and calls Tilty, naming her the Priestess of Darkness. Then he aloud wonders how exactly she will try to resist this power. Tilty just stands in the middle of the ruins, completely frightened and crying, staring with her eyes at how the world is falling apart. Nearby and in Celuria, it is the same. She sobs, clinging to some boy who looks like he is about to scream as soon as he sees his city wiped off the face of the earth. Even the knights shout, trying to fight back, but they are clearly overwhelmed by the very scale of the attack, which it's even worse when the monster releases an explosion, leveling the surrounding buildings to the ground. Parents grab their children and run, saving their own lives, while people are knocked down everywhere. Tilty begs for the night of horror to finally end. Eyes wide open, tears on the verge, but in response she hears only a dark chuckle echoing through the chaos. Tilty stands trembling as dark energy begins to rise around her. She wheezes that she can't take it anymore and that she won't forgive them for this. Tilty loses control and lets out a scream until a dark mark appears right on her forehead. From the ground grows a giant monster tree and shadows in one body, and Tilty stands right on its head, twisted to the side. She screams again that she won't forgive them for this. He returned to the ground and just froze. Celuria sits nearby, scared to the point of trembling, and asks what this huge thing even is. From there, a semi-corporeal giant rises above the ruins of the city and looks like something out of a nightmare. He sells watches from the roof. While the wooden giant engages in a duel with the bone monster, he realized what exactly he is seeing and what he can do. It's unbelievable how much dark power is flying from Tilty right now. She is much stronger than he expected. And the bone giant does not retreat, standing its ground in the very heart of all the records. Tilty, from her place on the giant's head, moves forward and calls the darkness, and then tears still stream down her face, she screams for the monster to move into battle and attack. The dark giant makes a devastating swing and releases a huge blow that flies straight into the face of the bone giant. The bone giant lets out a loud, painful scream. The force of the blow begins to tear him to pieces. Tilty stands on the top of her summoning and from there, above, looks at the ruins while the giant towers over everything. She cries, then finally loses herself and screams with all her might for the enemies to simply disappear. Crouching to the ground, Lake is completely exhausted from the sight. He calls it the dark giant and says its power is on a whole different level. He insists as soon as the dark giant even touches the enemy, Valgura crumbles as if it is being crushed. If the power of darkness to erase things has become even stronger while the bone giant continues to scream in pain, it seems like a miracle. Celuria looks up and says that Tilty is truly incredible to do such a thing. But at the same time, there is anxiety in her eyes about something elusive. She recalls how before she could only move the hands of darkness, and now she realizes the situation is completely different because the giant finally reveals its entire body right in the center of the city. Tilty stands on the giant's top, arms widely spread, and she shouts that this is exactly what she wanted. She looks completely lost, babbling about how beautiful this dark power is and how it is finally crashing down. Tilty lifts the giant's spirit, urging, "Don't stop and make all that despair sound even louder," while her order will also be to simply allow the darkness to devour everything in sight. Tears flow down her face as she screams about how the enemy tramples human lives and frantically insists that she will never forgive them. The dark giant raises his massive, twisted hand high up, mesmerized bows his head, and someone looks tiny on his shoulder just like then when. The bone monster lets out a pathetic, piercing scream and is completely powerless to stop what is coming next. The dark giant hurls a heavy blow straight to the head of the bone monster, hits directly, shatters it, and, in an instant, crushes the creature's jaw to pieces by the force of the blow alone. Like and Siluria are stuck in place and look from the ground, completely stunned by the insane power that Tilty demonstrates. Like watches the chaos and asks why all this is happening, while Sold stands unwavering in the smoke. Tilty loses self-control, cries, asks why she has to stand in someone else's way, and screams to call her brother. Sold simply calls Tilty's name, standing in the middle of the crater with his sword raised, and he tells her that she needs strength, to never lose her mind and to live, and promises that he will not let her fall into darkness.